some email about Zoom meetings.
You may be illegal, but
Some email about,
The council apparently addressed the absurdity of that provision and they're working on it.
you may be illegal.
Effectively, Chris, it was because meetings are historically in-person meetings and accessing the public and making it equitable to access that public by virtue of having an in-person meeting. Because of COVID, they enacted the ability to do things via Zoom. And luckily, we had the technology that kind of caught up at the same time. Now they're saying that was a temporary provision. We really need to go back to the old statute, so there's no challenges by public about any meetings that are held virtually, is effectively what it is.
Okay, here we go. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Planning and Zoning Committee meeting of May 26, 2021. May I have a roll call, please? Okay. Here we go.
Jeff here.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to
Jen
the
here.
Planning and Zoning Committee meeting of May 26.
Tom's here.
Why am I hearing myself, Madison?
Chris here.
Jenna?
Jen is here. That was weird.
Elliot?
I'm here. Elliot's here.
Tom?
I'm here.
Tom? Jeff?
Here.
Lynn here. Okay. With that, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Do we have a flag tonight, Madison?
We do. Just 1 second.
In Jeff's house.
Okay, there we go.
I pledge
Pledge
allegiance
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 to the
to the flag
of
of
the
the
United
United
States
States
of
of America,
and to
the
the republic
republic
for which it
which it
stands,
stands,
one
one
nation,
nation,
under
under
God,
God,
indivisible, with
indivisible,
liberty
with
and
liberty and
justice
justice
for all. Thank you. Okay, has everybody had time to read the agenda?
Yes.
Yes.
And Scott, has there been anything pulled or added?
Madam Chair, I don't know of anything that needs to be pulled or added. Madison, do you?
I do
Okay,
not
with
know.
that, may I have an approval of tonight's agenda, please? Or wait, do we need to do this? Conflicts of interest is new. Do we
Mhm.
need to do that previous to the approval of tonight's agenda or after?
I think you can do it after.
Okay, so may I have an approval for tonight's agenda, please?
I'll make a motion to approve tonight's agenda.
May I have a second?
Second.
Motion by Jeff, second by Tom. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Does anybody have a declaration of conflicts of interest?
Yes, I will be recusing myself for item 9.
Okay, Jenna will be recusing herself for item 9.
And I'll be recusing myself for Amanda Mears' presentation.
Item 7.
Item 7. Okay. Thank you. Approval of the minutes of May 12th. Does anybody have any corrections or changes they'd like? No,
I did not.
neither do I. Anybody else? With that, may I have a motion to approve the minutes in May 12th, please?
I make a
Make-
motion to approve the minutes from May 12th.
May I have a second?
I'll second.
Motion by Jenna, second by Chris, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Is there anybody in the public who has any comments that are not on tonight's agenda? Madison, do we see any hands?
I do not see any hands raised, Madam Chair.
Okay, with that, we'll close public comment. Planning Commission comments. Does anybody have anything? No, 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 no. I see a few heads shaking no. I don't see everybody else. So with that, we'll close Planning Commission comments. Okay, 832 Main Street, Jones Residence, alteration of approved plans for new single-family residence. Scott?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I am going to keep this kind of short because we've got a long agenda. In the packet, there was a nice memo that Madison put together outlining the minor changes that were made to a plan that was just approved recently. And this is something that we are going to be doing. I think maybe in the past, if something received final approval from the design review board, and then went to building permit submittal, and there were some changes. I'm not sure if those kind of things came back to the DRB with a regular, occurrence. We're going to try to do that, not to hold up anything on the building permit side, but just to make sure that whatever you guys spend time reviewing and approving and giving comments on, doesn't change too much from the time you approve it to the time it gets built. So as I mentioned, there's a staff report that just kind of goes through the changes. I'd like to just introduce this and let Michael walk you through it. I think that's going to be the most expedient way to get through these. Most of these are minor. We don't see that these affect in any way the standards that you approved these plans under in the first place. So Michael, if you're out there, I will introduce you and let you walk him through the changes. Let me know what you want me to, which pages you want me to go to in the plan set.
Okay, thanks, Scott.
Sure.
Please state your name and address, Michael.
I'm Michael Pukas. My mailing address is P.O. Box 288, Gypsum, Colorado 81637.
Thank you.
Scott, I think if you go to sheet 02, that's probably the most descriptive.
Okay. There we are.
And you've done a good job of outlining the changes that we've made from the approved design to the design that we're submitting for building permit. Everything is pretty much cosmetic in nature. One of the biggest changes is that we decided that the existing deck on the east side or the river side of the property, it was not feasible to try to maintain any of that deck as a pre-existing non-conforming condition. So the entirety of the existing deck will be demoed, and we are constructing a new deck that conforms to the setback and the 30-foot high watermark setback and the lot coverage.
Michael,
So
do you
there was
mind
a
if
change.
I was going to go to the site plan real quick to show that.
Okay,
So this is the area that we're talking about.
yes.
Here's the 30-foot setback line. Go back to 02.
Yeah. So a couple of the other changes have to do to windows on the south and east side of the building at the living room that's on the ground floor and the loft area that's on the upper level. This building is adjacent to the property to the south, which is a very large 2.5 story structure. So I decided to eliminate some of the windows on the south side because essentially they're just going to be looking in right at the neighboring house. So some of the windows on the south side were eliminated. At the great room on the east side, we changed that sliding door from an 8-foot tall, 10-foot wide door. We increased that size to be 10 feet tall and 12 feet wide. And corresponding, the windows above that door were changed in size. The chimney shape was revised a little bit. The general shape of it was maintained, but the overall size was changed. The reason being that instead of doing a wood burning fireplace that would be fitted with a gas log set, that would require a vertically vented chimney, we're doing a sealed gas fireplace that can be direct vented through the wall. So the chimney size could be slimmed down a little bit to allow for a larger door out onto the deck. And on the north elevation, there were a couple of minor window changes to the bedroom and closet areas. And the owner also decided to finish the lower level basement during the initial construction phase instead of saving that as a renovation in the future. So now the project will have 5 total bedrooms when it's finished instead of 4, and our parking requirements still meet that requirement. We still have 4 parking spaces on site, 2 in the garage and 2 on surface in the driveway. Other than that, there have been no changes to the building footprint. Scott did notice that there was or maybe Madison noticed that there was a change in lot coverage, building lot coverage. I'm not exactly sure where that came from. That may have been a discrepancy on my part in calculating, but overall the building footprint did not change. There was that slight change in site coverage, or sorry, impervious surface coverage, due to removing the existing deck and creating a new deck. That's the extent of the changes.
Anybody have any questions? Michael, with the change in the impervious surface, does it still work with the code?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Shall we make this an easy one then? May I have a motion to approve?
Madam Chair, if you could open public comment, please.
Open to public comment, thank you. I'm gonna make myself a sign. When people are in front of me, it's easy to remember, but when it's on Zoom, it's not so easy. Let's open it to public comment.
If you would like to speak on public comment, please raise your hand. It should be a button on the bottom of your screen, and I'll allow you to talk. I see no raised hands, Madam Chair.
Thank you. So we'll close public comment. Now may I have a motion to approve?
I make a motion to approve of the 832 Main Street building permit for the Jones residence
Should we state
as modified.
as modified? Thank you. We have
Second.
a motion by Jenna, second by Jeff, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Aye.
Okay, next up,
Thank you.
thank you, Michael.
Thanks, Michael.
And just kind of following up on my intro, I was talking with Lynn earlier today, and you know, in the past, we've gotten comfortable with staff approving things like fences and maybe signs and things like that. I do not feel comfortable when we approve a set of final plans and then even if the changes are minor, I'm going to keep bringing those back to you guys, if you're okay with that.
I'm fine with it. Anybody else have any issues? No? Thank you, Scott. I think it's a good idea. In the past, there have been a couple things that have happened and caused issues, so we
Exactly.
appreciate it. Okay, next, it is the 414 Eagle River Street. Is it Meyer residence?
Mir.
Mir, and Jeff is recusing himself.
Yes, so Madison, like text,
Yes. I'm sorry, go ahead.
do you want to call me or text me when I can come back?
Yeah, I'll just put you on hold and I'll bring you back in, and I'll also shoot you a text when we're done.
So you can push something on your end that's going to zap me out of here for a minute?
Yes, sir.
Just like the Gong Show.
Less hooky, but more effective.
Okay.
All right.
Scott, please.
Yes, thank you. So in front of you tonight is a proposal by Matt and Amanda Meir 414 Eagle River Street, and this is for an addition. And generally, Madison did the review on this. I certainly helped. We spent some time looking at the plans. We met with the architect, Greg Sparhawk, who's with us tonight. I'm going to kind of do the same thing. I'll be short and let Greg and Amanda, I think, is on the call tonight. Let them walk you through it. But essentially, this is a really nice update to an existing building in town. And there are some pre-existing nonconformities, some elements of the existing building that do violate setbacks. I think there's a small corner of a building that encroaches right up to the property line or just over it. The improvements are such that there are some improvements that would be vertical in nature. So they're going up and not further expanding the nonconformity. As in the past, staff is supporting those. Our interpretation of the code is that those are allowed. Anything that, so long as it doesn't exacerbate or increase the nonconformity. And in this case, we're talking about a nonconforming structure. The use is fine. So from that standpoint, I think everything else checks out as far as lot coverage, impervious coverage. There's nothing being proposed that would increase the parking requirements. And I don't know if Madison has anything else to add, but we are recommending approval with conditions. And Madison, do you have anything to add to that, or can we turn it over to Greg?
I think we can turn it over to Greg.
Okay. Greg, just let me know which, or Amanda, which sheets in your plans you'd like me to scroll to.
And please, before you speak, state your name and address.
Thanks, Scott. Amanda, would you like to say anything before we get started?
No, just really thank you guys for consideration of our addition. We've been up in the valley for about since 2007 and Minturn residents for the last 5 years, and we're just excited and thank you again.
Amanda, will you please state your name and address for the
Oh,
record?
yeah, Amanda Meir, 414 Eagle Street. And then that's Matt.
Greg, over to you.
Thanks.
I feel
Okay.
like I'm a television person.
So Greg Sparhawk, 245 Pine Street, Minturn, Colorado. Thank you all for the time in reviewing this. Scott, Madison, thank you guys for taking the time to look through this. Matt and Amanda, their house is, they're kind of outgrowing their house. They want to expand a bit, stay in town, but not do anything real grandiose. As Scott mentioned, the existing house sits over, it's one of the houses, and it's been in Minturn for a long time. And when it was built over setbacks that, not quite sure if they were there at the time, probably not. But so as you can see on the drawing that's in front of you, there's kind of the outline of the house. The front is all white. That's existing house that we're doing a little bit of interior work to. And there's a little bit of exterior, but not a lot. The kind of crosshatch pattern is existing footprint that we're renovating. And then the next back with the just the cross, just the regular, yeah, thank you, Scott. That area is new construction. So what Scott was referring to, kind of the crosshatch area, I'll go to the elevations here shortly. But that's all kind of existing footprint that we're doing work in. And there is a portion of that over to the side there that sits over the 5-foot setback and does go right up to the property line. And then again, the portion in the back is all new construction, vertical construction that falls within the building envelope. So if you don't mind, Scott, I guess if you could turn to page, let's see. Well, yeah, I guess we can go there. That's the existing blocked out elevations, as well as the existing footprint. The back portion is a storage closet and covered deck with actually has some basement space underneath of it. And then if you could go to the next page. This is the proposed plan. The plan on the right shows the bump out to the rear, which is going to be a multi-use office space. They're essentially taking that existing footprint area and expanding it into kind of a little bit of a great room concept with laundry and a powder room. Up to the left is the roof plan. And the area that's kind of bubbled there over to the right will be a stair inside that comes up, kind of an alternating tread stair that comes up to a hatch. It's kind of like a skylight hatch that accesses that roof deck. That area right there is over the setback, but again, is not expanding the footprint of the non-conforming condition. The next page is elevations. So the top left corner is it's the front of the home, and that's pretty much remaining kind of unchanged. That's on Eagle Street. And the over to the right of that is the side that is butts up against the neighbor, or butts up at the neighboring property. And with that, you can see kind of along that vertical section, we're proposing a privacy wall for the roof deck. That the house that's right next door it's a pretty large house. You can see the kind of the outline of it in the elevation below. Elevation below is sorry about that. That's Eagle Street looking at, I think that's Eagle Street. Sorry, that's looking at their front door, which is actually kind of the side of the house. And then beyond in the background, you can see that privacy fence and the addition to the left. And then the outline behind it is the adjacent house. So they're with this roof deck, because they're not going up 2 stories on an addition, they want to kind of retain some privacy in that space. And then over to the left, there is a rear elevation looking at the back of the house. The next page, probably this is just some sections through the building, but probably the one that shows the upper right-hand corner kind of shows that skylight hatch, access hatch with the alternating tread stair that goes up to the roof deck. And then the final page, if you don't mind. So these are just some materials and perspectives looking at the proposed massing of the addition to the rear. And that is the home. They're looking at pretty, natural materials, a fair amount of stones, some darker colors, light roof, get some contrast. Right now, I think it's that the house is kind of a board and batten. They're looking at painting that, but would like to retain the option to switch that out with lap siding that would be painted a similar color if it gets to the point of doing the work and if there's any issue with that siding. And I think that's it.
Okay, Madison, should we go to public comment first?
If that's what you would like, Madam Chair.
Do we have anybody out there?
We do have a few people in the audience. If you would like to speak on public comment, please raise your hand. It should be a button at the bottom of your screen. I see no raised hands, Madam Chair.
Thank you. So we'll take it back to the commission. Is there anybody there that would like to speak?
Lynn, Greg, I had a question for you. As I'm looking at the screen right now that Scott has set up, the picture that's kind of as I look at the screen, the bottom left-hand corner, the gray structure to the left, is that the neighboring house?
Yes.
Okay. I have to say, I think it's kind of fun with that flat rooftop deck, and I think it looks great. So I didn't know what that big mass form was, but that's the neighbor. Okay, thanks.
Anybody else? Speak up.
No, I think it's great. I do like, I like what they're doing with the small space. And especially with the nonconformities, I think that works well. And then the rooftop deck, obviously, I've been pushing rooftop decks all the way through town since I got on the planning commission. So thumbs up on that one. Party time. Party on Eagle Street. Otherwise, I don't have any concerns.
I have a question. Greg said they'd like to keep the option open if they want to change the siding to lap siding. They would need to come back to us for that, would they not?
Well, I guess that's up to you. Greg, are you representing what that lap siding would look like here at all? Or not really?
No, not really. This shows kind of a continuation of the existing pattern siding. I don't think we would have a problem. It certainly wouldn't be holding up the building permit or anything if we needed to come back in and provide some imagery to show what that option would look like.
I think that's reasonable, Madam Chair.
Okay. Does that need to be, do we want to do that as a condition, or that would be just a separate function?
You could do it either way. I think it's implied that you're giving approval for this set of plans, and if there are changes, we need to bring those through. So if you want to make darn sure that if the siding changes, you want to condition that, that way you're on record as saying, bring it back. You're not relying on staff to catch it at building permit or sometime afterwards.
Well, I guess the reason I'm asking that is because if they were to come back and do it, would they have to fill out a whole new building permit, and that would be a whole new cost? Or if we did it as a condition.
It would be a minor DRB application. So $75 an application and some kind of rendering or example of the siding.
Okay.
That's
Does
how we would.
anybody else have any feelings on that?
Well, we have a little bit of time. Is there a particular reason you can't simply Google an example of what that siding looks like? So we're not marching down this road again. Take a look at it now or shortly into this meeting, and then press with approval of conditions.
Can you do that, Greg?
Sorry to jump in here, and Scott, please correct me if I'm off base here, but I feel like any plans that would be approved do need to be within the packet, and including materials and stuff like that. So if we want to make it a condition that if they decide to do lap siding, staff can approve it when it comes in, I think I'd be more comfortable with that rather than approving something that wasn't in the packet for the public to view.
Good idea, Madison.
I agree with that. Madison's correct.
Anybody else have anything?
No, I would just agree that staff just approves it. I don't think it needs to come back to the board for this entire process.
So with that, would somebody like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion, approval with conditions for 414 Eagle River Street, Mirror Residence Edition.
And will you please state the condition?
Conditions, plural, as accorded in the package.
Is that not an additional, Scott?
Yeah, I
The
think
staff
you just,
approval that was put in there already stated with conditions as listed in the package. Did it not?
it did. I think what Madam Chair is saying that the additional condition would be that staff may approve changes to siding materials.
Exactly. Thank you.
Okay. So
May I
I
have-
make a motion approve with conditions and the additional condition of staff approval of siding changes for 414 Eagle River Street, Mirror Residence Addition.
Motion by Tom. May I have a second?
I'll second.
Chris, second by Chris. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much. Appreciate your time.
Yep, best of luck, you guys.
Thanks, Greg.
We'll see you
Thanks,
at
Greg.
building permit.
Thanks, Greg.
Thanks.
Well, this is efficiency in motion right here. This is good. Madison, are you ready to present 453 Pine Street?
Yes, I am. Just 1 second. I'm bringing Jeff back in.
Okay.
Can I
It's
ask a quick
multitasking.
question? Madison, if I stay on here, do you need me to log off as a participant and then log back in on the general?
No, that's fine. If you would just turn off your camera, I would appreciate that. But you can certainly stay on in the capacity that you are now.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Okay. Awesome. Jeff is back. So I believe Jennifer is here. I don't see Robert. However, Jennifer Holmes and Robert Creasy, they're the owners of 453 Pine Street. They bought the house about a year ago, I believe. And I should probably turn my video on. And they wanted to create a more inviting frontage for their house. However, they were over lot coverage, not building coverage, by a significant amount. And so they were proposing to take away some of the impervious coverage to kind of give them a net benefit, to net gain for the porch that they want to put on the front of their house. They have expressed concerns about safety during the winter, given that the current porch area is just a stone step with no overhang to it, and so of course it gets very icy during when there's snowfall. They'll be taking out these two parking spots, or the furthest parking spot closest to the tree, and the gravel area next to it. They'll be taking that out. They will be leaving the parking spot, I guess, closest to you in this picture, while converting the back part of that gravel right in front of that stone porch step to landscaping. And I believe they have plans for a garden. They do have plenty of parking in the back. They can access their property off of Meadow Lane. They have a garage with 2 parking spots, and they have 2 parking spots in front of the garage. So this lot definitely has plenty of parking. That wasn't a concern of ours. We just wanted to make sure that everything was fine, given that it is a pre-existing non-conforming use, and staff believes that this is we're lessening, not exacerbating this pre-existing use. They're fine on building coverage. They were right up to the line. They were very thankful of the code ordinance that just passed, because that did give them that few extra percentage to make this work. But I think this is a benefit, and I think it works through the code. So I will turn it over to Jennifer and or Robert, if he's here, if they'd like to say anything else.
Hi, my name is Robert Creasy. Jennifer Holmes is here with me. We moved here about a year ago. We're at 453
Robert,
Pine.
please state your address.
Sure. We're at 453 Pine Street
Thank you.
here in Minturn, and we moved here with our kids just about almost a year ago. And let's see. First, I just want to thank Madam Chair and the board for considering our design review request. Staff has been really helpful and supportive through the process. Madison's written assessment, I think, covers everything pretty thoroughly, but I will just try to highlight a few things. Madison, if you could scroll down to the second photo. I'll just sort of describe what we're actually trying to do. So it's down a little bit.
Robert, I'm driving tonight, so.
It's up a little, it's above that, I think.
Okay, so let me just
Scroll
shrink
up
down so I can manipulate a little bit better here. So which sheet are you looking at?
Scroll up to the second photo from the top. A little bit further.
Okay.
Yeah, so this one here.
Okay. One moment.
So as you can see, our front door faces the side yard. That's Pine Street off to the right. The shaded side of the house is what we'll call the north side of the house, is what faces the street. And that we were really feeling like the front of the house just doesn't have any character or presence on the street, which And then the front door has no protection in the wintertime. So you can see there's a stone stoop currently in front of the door. And what we'd like to do is wrap that around on the north side, just past that first window, maybe a third of the way across the front, and then put a roof over it. So by adding a roof over the patio surface, it becomes building coverage. And as Madison noted, thankfully, with the change in the allowable building coverage, we're right just under 45% with converting that to building coverage. The impervious surface we were over, and by removing, as Madison described, that parking space closer to the tree, and then the gravel area in front of the stoop back toward that fence line, we are removing about almost 4.5% of the impervious surface. So, or the net change is about 4.5% less impervious surface. So we're not contributing to a greater nonconformity. We're reducing the nonconformity. And then our hope is that the porch will give the house a better presence on the street. And Pine Street really is a friendly pedestrian street. We really enjoy everyone walking up and down the street all the time, kids riding bikes, and we just think it'll make the house feel more friendly and open and inviting. Our landscaping efforts will be we've actually already started some fencing work that will cordon off that parking space. We're going to add a paver walkway up to the front porch, and then in front of that window to the left of the orange door, we're putting in a planting bed. And so that will permanently convert all that area from parking into landscaping or pathway. And it's not a paved pathway, just a gravel pathway with pavers set into the gravel. Madison, was there anything else I need to touch on, or?
I think that worked for this purposes. So I guess we'll turn it over to the Planning Commission.
Thank you for everything.
Madison, let's, like the other one, go see if there's anybody for public comment, please.
Of course. So if there's anybody in the public comment, please raise your hand. It should be a button at the bottom of your screen, and I'll allow you to talk. I see no raised hands, Madam Chair.
So we'll close public comment, and let's go to commission. Anybody on commission have anything they'd like to say? Jenna?
Yeah, I'll start. First off, I want to compliment you on your door color. I love bright door colors that contrast with the rest of the building. It does pull your eye and does create a visual cue to where your door is located. So I hope you'll keep that. Otherwise, yeah, I think that this is a great idea. I mean, we live in ice and snow land, and it's kind of on the north side, so it makes sense that you're going to do something to cover up. I probably would recommend you doing a gutter if it's not on there. Just so that you don't create ice at the bottom of where you're stepping off the porch. Just because with snow melt, especially if you're in the shadows, which this may be a little bit, a gutter is a great friend. But otherwise, I think it's a great idea. And I think your curb appeal will definitely increase, especially with landscaping. And hopefully, if I'm reading this correctly, are you putting any landscaping on the picket fence only 4 feet tall? Are you putting anything that's like on the other side of the fence, or just within that fenced area?
We are putting a planting bed on the street side of the fence to
cool.
do some flower beds there in front of the fence.
Awesome. Then that's all I have. Thank you.
Jeff?
Thanks, Madam Chair. I think it's all great. Vast improvements to what's there now. I'm a particular fan of when front doors face, the main street versus the side. So anything you can do to help that is good. And I think you have all great ideas, and it's going to be a big improvement to the house.
Thank you.
Chris?
I agree with everybody, Madison, Jenna, Jeff. Yeah, it looks great. I think it's going to be perfect. And yeah, we live in a winter area. It'd be nice to not just walk right into your house, and it's going to be perfect. So good job.
Thanks.
Tom?
Porches are cool. Every kid needs a porch. I have no questions and no issues. Thanks.
Elliot?
I think having a porch is great. I think adding to the social landscape, we walk by your house every day with our dog, and A+ on the door, just like Jenna said. It even piqued my own interest on how to repaint my own house. So thank you for that. I think it's great. I think it's going to be a great addition to what we call the Meek Man Loop. So we're looking forward to seeing that.
I think it's a great idea too. I would be cautious as to what plants you put on. That door faces south, does it not?
East.
East. Okay, you should be okay then. It's just that south gets really, real hot, so you have to be cautious as to what you pick. So with that, may I have a motion?
I'll make a motion for approval of the addition at 453 Pine Street.
May I have a second?
A second.
Elliot, I'm not sure you can vote tonight because you're
Oh, because everyone's here.
because everyone's here.
All right.
Sorry.
No problem.
So may I, second by Jeff. Motion by Chris, second by Jeff. All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay, thank you.
luck.
And at this point, Madam Chair, I will be no longer a planning commission for the rest of the evening.
Bye, Jenna.
I recuse myself.
We just can't go anywhere.
But she's still presenting, correct, Madison?
That is,
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So with that, Scott, Belden Place, please and thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the main event tonight, Belden Place preliminary plan for PUD. And this is a proposal that came before the Planning Commission last year, just about this time, in June and July, and received conceptual approval for a very similar iteration of the plans you're going to see tonight. I think effectively the same or similar density as far as the number of units. And so that was passed along from conceptual with recommendations from the Planning Commission. We'll probably get into that a little bit tonight. Usually with something of this complexity and magnitude, we do expect at least one Planning Commission hearing, but most likely two. So that's how we've approached this review tonight. There's a lot of material that we asked you to go through as a Planning Commission and a pretty lengthy staff report. So in that staff report, we did our best to outline the proposal and the process, where this preliminary plan fits in the process. I've got a slideshow tonight, PowerPoint, that kind of like the one that we did for introducing Minturn North a month or so ago. We'll go through that and kind of let everyone in on the purpose of the PUD process and where we are in the process. But essentially, this is the second stop in that process. So it's a deep dive into the details. It's a review by staff and all the town's consultants of the things that the Planning Commission may have passed along at conceptual, making sure that those have been addressed or at least considered in this new preliminary plan. And then, we need to probably talk about the referral comments that we received during the review of this from other agencies. But essentially, we're recommending approval with conditions of this preliminary plan. And so I'll go into more detail. I think what I'll do now, I've got the staff report up on the screen, but what I want to do is just switch gears and bring up the PowerPoint, if that's okay. Does anybody have any questions before I do that, or anybody need a break?
Anybody? We're okay, let's go.
Okay.
Maybe we'll take one a little later
All right.
when we get foggy in the brain.
Scott, before you jump into the presentation, I would like to state, kind of like we did for Minturn North, there is a lot of material that we will be getting through tonight. Hopefully we'll get to public comment, but that is not guaranteed. So I just want to make everybody aware of that, that there's no guarantee that we do get to public comment tonight if we do in fact continue to the next meeting. Thank you.
We will do our best to get through a lot of information tonight. But again, I think we're anticipating that we're probably going to take 2 meetings just so we can understand what's being proposed, understand the issues, and discuss those. So tonight we're going to do introductions and project overview. We're going to talk about the planned unit development process, criteria and conformance findings, outstanding issues and staff recommendation. The applicant's going to have their presentation, then we'll open it up for Planning Commission question and answer, then some public comment if we have time tonight. If we don't, and it looks like we're having a second meeting, I think we'll make sure we have public comment the second hearing. So that's what we anticipate, and let's see how this goes. So the applicant is Miners Base Camp LLC. They're represented tonight by Jenna Skinner and Allison Perry. I'll let them take over as soon as possible here. Our staff, you know us all, Mike Sawyer, Michelle Mateer, Richard Peterson Creamer, Jeff Spinell, the town engineer, myself, Arnold Martinez, Public Works Supervisor, and last but certainly not least, Madison. All these folks are the core team that reviewed everything from the submittal date back in November of last year to today. Our consultants that we've worked with on this file, Jim Mann from Ellers Public Finance Advisors, Megan Winokur from Holland and Hart, Christy Radabaugh, Martin and Wood Water Consultants, Eric Peterson, SGM, he did the review of the environmental impact report. Ellie Carroll did weigh in on this. She is with Veracity, looking at public transportation in the form of trails and trail easements and things like that. And then John Volk, who does a lot of the water plant consulting work for the town. The referral agents that received a referral for this, Colorado Division of Transportation, Parks and Wildlife, Eagle River Water and Sanitation District, Eagle County School District, XL Energy, Eagle River Watershed Council, Eagle River Fire Protection District, Colorado Geologic Survey, and then United States Forest Service. I think we received responses from each one of these agencies except for the Forest Service. So as I mentioned last summer about this time, conceptual review took place, and there was an endorsement or an approval of that concept plan and authorizing the applicant to move forward to the preliminary plan stage, which is where all the heavy lifting gets done. That's when detailed plans get generated, engineering plans, housing plans, the actual architecture and renderings of what the development's going to look like. So that's where we are today, is the preliminary plan for PUD. As I mentioned, the submittal was in November of 2020, and we've been working with the applicant ever since to get this ready for a hearing. The next step, if the applicant makes it through preliminary plan, after Planning Commission, they will go before the council, and then they will move on to final plan, final plat, and that's the time when we would talk about development agreements and subdivision improvement agreements. So we started last November. In December, January, and February, we went through kind of an internal completeness review, making sure we had the information we needed before we sent it out on a public referral, which happened in February. That usually takes 21 days. And so since March, we've been kind of responding and working with the applicant and their responses to referral comments to make sure that issues that are identified have been addressed. If they either haven't been addressed and they're kind of outstanding issues, we've noted those in the staff report, and we'll talk about those tonight. As with most of these kind of developments, there's always going to be points of departure between the applicant and the town. If there is either a requirement in the code and they would like to get a variance essentially through the PUD process and this review process that we're going through, it's their opportunity to kind of make their case and describe why they would like a variation from that code requirement. If they differ in opinion on solutions to some of the design aspects or engineering aspects, again, this is the time to talk about those. And I'll talk a little bit more about how the PUD process allows for that discussion. So just real quickly, here's a vicinity map showing Highway 24 to the north of the property. This is the Boneyard open space parcel right here, the Eagle River parcel itself, which is an amalgamation of several parcels that have been obtained by the applicant over the last couple of years. This shows Meadow Drive in proximity, and then the other Forest Service administrative site over here to the south. And then the site is bordered to the west by US Forest Service.
Excuse me, Scott, I think
Yeah.
you said Meadow Drive and I think it's Mountain Drive,
Mountain Drive, sorry.
just so we have it in the record properly.
Yep. So this is located within the Southtown character area within the residential zone district. The PUD sits on 2.73 acres, and it's a mix of 27 lot types, including single family, duplex, townhomes, and then multifamily structures. And then there's a mix of total of 42 dwelling units, and I believe that includes the Christensen residence, which is already constructed on, I think it's lot 17, and an ADU that's included in that development. They're proposing up to, or excuse me, 50% restricted units that would be for resident occupied. We'll get into this a little bit later, but our housing ordinance that was adopted last July requires a minimum of 20% of the units in a new development of this size to be deed restricted and reserved for local residents. They're proposing 50%. They're also meeting the minimum required 10% of units being price capped with an initial sales price starting at 200% AMI. Again, we'll probably get into some real specifics on their housing plan either later tonight or at the next meeting. And I will say that the applicant and the town have met twice in the last week and a half with the Eagle County Housing and Development Authority to really talk about their housing plan and how we can either strengthen it or make it more workable from the town's perspective as far as enforcement. So I certainly appreciate the applicant's attention to that and willingness to meet with the county. The county is going to be helping the town from this day forward in basically administering the town's housing program, the housing ordinance. So open space and recreational uses, that's included within the PUD. They've got an open space plan. They show where in the PUD they're counting open space. They've got active or open usable open space areas in the form of a park. So we'll get into that as well. And then the allowed uses are not only residential, they are proposing to allow for some home occupations in their PUD guide. So real quickly, I went over this with Minturn North, but for anybody that's joining us tonight that's just tuning in and understanding what PUDs are all about, the purpose of the Planned Unit Development Overlay Zone District is to allow for flexibility and create for landowners to creatively plan for the overall development. So the whole notion behind a PUD is to allow for some deviation, or I've mentioned the word variation. If someone proposes a PUD, it's kind of an invitation for them to look at the typical setbacks, building height, lot coverage, impervious coverage, things like that deal with the bulk, mass, and location of improvements, usually for some benefit. And usually that has to do with preserving sensitive lands. Usually PUDs are associated with larger tracts of land that may have rivers or other water bodies in them, wetlands, steep slopes, things like that you want to try to avoid. So there's an incentive for the developer and the designers of the project to really look at kind of clustering building sites and making better use of the land, and not relying on kind of prototypical building or lot sizes, building setbacks, things like that, but getting more creative. So the PUD, any PUD must be consistent with the community plan, and provide for new technology and promote innovative and efficient land use patterns. Integration of land uses. A lot of PUDs are kind of mixed use where they integrate commercial and residential together. They also are intended to preserve valued environments like I was talking about, maintain and improve air quality and water quality. Again, through some of those design innovations, if they're preserving lands that shouldn't be disturbed, or they've got something in their plan that proposes kind of innovative engineering by way of stormwater management and drainage, filtering water and things like that. Those are things that we want to see. Providing for a range of housing opportunities, improving the overall design character and quality of new development, permitting the integration rather than the separation of uses, establishing land use patterns that promote and expand opportunities for public transportation and trails, compact street and utility networks. A lot of this has to do with, really, again, kind of creative land planning, more efficient and more compact in many cases, preserving valued environmental, historic, or mineral resource lands, maintaining and enhancing surface and groundwater quality, providing applicants the opportunity to contribute to the town's multi-use trail system, or to maintain access to public lands and rivers, establishing incentives for applicants to encourage the provision of long-term affordable housing, and also being consistent with the goals and purposes of the community plan and the land use regulations. So, it's a lot, but those are kind of the objectives of why we want to, in certain instances, entertain a PUD if it achieves some of those goals and produces something that's more efficient than a typical subdivision using typical setbacks and things like that. So real quickly, the purpose of the preliminary plan review is for the applicant to specifically respond to the issues and concerns identified during concept plan review, and to propose detailed, properly engineered solutions to those problems that conform in all respects to the approved concept plan. The burden at the preliminary plan stage is on the applicant to provide detailed information and mitigation proposals to be evaluated by the town. The preliminary plan shall include a community plan and development guidelines to the development of the PUD, hereinafter the PUD community plan and development guidelines. I just refer to those as the PUD guide and design guidelines. Specifying the standards and limitations that will guide future development of the property. So effectively, when someone comes in with a PUD, they're not only being asked to use some flexibility and creativity to produce something that achieves kind of a higher bar over what normally would get created using typical zoning, but also to provide a plan that effectively becomes the zoning for the property. So they kind of write their own zoning code. The town approves that. The town approves the zoning and allowed uses within the PUD, and also the standards like setbacks, building height, lot coverage, things like that. So the goals or the approval criteria, number one, that the resulting development will be consistent with the community plan. So these are the actual findings. At the end of this process, when the Planning Commission and the Town Council take action on this to approve it with conditions, deny this proposal, these are the criteria or findings that need to be met at the end of that process. So there needs to be a positive finding that the development will be consistent with the community plan and that the PUD reflects the character of the town, that the area around the development can be planned in substantial harmony with the proposed PUD, that the adjacent and nearby neighborhoods will not be detrimentally affected by the proposed PUD, that the mass and scale of individual buildings and the overall density of the PUD shall be consistent in scale and character to avoid abrupt and/or severe differences with the surrounding area, and that the PUD can be completed within a reasonable period of time, which shall be determined prior to final approval of the PUD. So that usually gets into phasing or any subdivision improvement agreements associated with a phasing plan. That the PUD provides for the appropriate treatment of the Eagle River corridor as a community recreational amenity and focal point. That the residents of the PUD have easy access to recreational amenities. That any increase in density proposed above what is permitted in the underlying zone shall be mitigated by increasing the land dedications to open space, recreational amenities, or other public facilities and services. That any proposed commercial or industrial development can be justified, and that the streets are adequate to support the anticipated traffic, and the development will not overload the streets outside the planned area. And that the proposed utility and drainage facilities are adequate for the population densities and type of development proposed. That the residential density and intensity of uses shall be limited as required by the town council upon consideration of the community plan, the official zone district map, and the specific characteristics of the land. That a favorable finding is made on the environmental assessment or environmental impact report, and that the preliminary plan for PUD shall comply with the following open space and recreation standards. And that gets into the recommended 25% open space for PUDs. Okay, so in staff's review, again, this is enumerated in the staff report, but the staff generally feels that this plan does generally conform to the community plan and the town's growth management policies. We also feel that the plan exhibits efficient land use patterns integrated with and informed by the existing town fabric, specifically the area around this property. We also feel that the PUD is located to take advantage of public transit services and may contribute to the town's pedestrian infrastructure. We also feel that the plan permits a range of housing options, including locals only housing and deed restricted price capped units in excess of the town's housing requirements. It also appears to meet the town's character and compatibility standards. And also that utilities are available and service lines are in place or in proximity to serve the project, depending on the availability of water and sewer capacity in the future. And I'll stop right there. You may have noticed in the some of the referral comments, the Eagle River Water and Sanitation District is currently working on a plan to upgrade the lift station at Dowd. And the completion of that project really has a lot to do, not just with Belden Place, but with other developments that are working their way through the process or that we anticipate coming in. Right now they've got capacity with their existing infrastructure at Dowd to serve most of what's going on in town, but looking long term, they really need to make that improvement to be able to serve this development in its entirety and things like Minturn North. So there's some other projects that are kind of dependent on those improvements. Same thing with water. As you know, the town has a moratorium right now on any new developments over 5 units until and unless the town realizes its water saving measures and some capital improvements that will provide essentially more wet water for projects like this. This project is, and the applicants are fortunate that they have existing taps. So they have the ability to start the project and build a certain number of units without the need for that additional water. So I think we'll talk about that during this process as well. But so let's see what else. Outstanding issues or issues of nonconformance. As noted in the staff report, the applicant is asking for a variation to the recommended 25% open space. I fully expect we're going to talk about this tonight in relation to the proposed density and the number of units being asked for. So I don't want to belabor that right now, but that is one of those issues that we anticipate talking about. And then other issues that we need, either additional information or need to be resolved prior to final plan and final plat. One of them is drainage. So the applicant has been working with the town on their drainage plans, their grading and drainage plans that show detention on their site of stormwater from their proposal or from their project, and also water that's coming onto the site from offsite. And early on in this process, we identified some opportunities that have to do with a master drainage plan that the town did approve in 2013 that show that, that address different areas of town, and particularly in Southtown, there's water coming off of US Forest Service property, and it's, impacting properties that lie between Highway 24 and the Forest Service property. So there's kind of a global or regional stormwater management issue that the town is aware of. And one of the solutions identified in that plan is to essentially pipe some of that water after detention and after treatment under Highway 24 and daylight it either on the Boneyard open space or somewhere on that north side, or get it to the river. And so we directed the applicant early on in this process to take that approach to their drainage plan. And we're still working through actually how that could work and if it can work. And what I mean by that is the Eagle River the Eagle Valley Land Trust holds the conservation easement for the Boneyard. And right now we don't know that the conservation easement would allow for that kind of improvement. So what we've asked the applicant to do, our preferred plan as a town is to pursue that long range drainage solution. But it does implicate the conservation easement. We're working with the town attorney's office to, just to keep working through that. If there's a process that we can go through with the land trust, and if there's something that can be done that would not violate the conservation values of that conservation easement, I think that's the preferred plan. In the interim, though, we've asked the applicant kind of at a late date to provide assurance to the town through their engineer that if they had to deal with all the water on their site, they could. And so we've got a letter from Dave at Timberline Engineering. We also have some response from Jeff Spinell, the town engineer that responds to this situation. And I believe that was probably sent out earlier this week. So that's a long way of saying we know there's some issues that we need to deal with drainage. The bottom line for you tonight is that staff feels that although not perfect, there is a solution that deals with the drainage and retention or detention on site, and that we're going to continue to work with the applicant, the Eagle Valley Land Trust, and town staff to see if there's a better alternative to that. Some other issues that still are outstanding that I think can be resolved before final plan. I'm just looking for documentation of abandonment of some existing easements on some of the properties that were part of this PUD. Historically, there's some easements, and I think Jeff Spinell is looking for some documentation on abandonment of those. Consolidated title report for all properties, again, fairly technical but important requirement that we need before we can move forward with receipt of any final plan or plat. Updating cost estimates. This is something that really happens after preliminary plan, where we really get into final design, final plat, and a subdivision improvement agreement, which relies almost entirely on cost estimates from those final construction level designs for roads, water, sewer. The estimates then get used to make sure that we have enough collateralization for those improvements in the event that the developer doesn't complete those and the town has to step in. So just kind of a housekeeping item that we are looking for those updated cost estimates. I think you'll probably hear from the applicant's representatives tonight that since they provided their initial estimates some months ago, the cost of construction have gone up 30 to 40%. So, they're going to have to update those anyways. And then just a myriad of issues associated with the plat that I think the applicant is fully aware of and working to address. I think they did supply the town with an updated plat last week or a week and a half ago. We have not had time to go through that and report on that for this hearing. But I guess the bottom line there is that they have responded, and I think they've probably addressed many of those concerns. That again is something that we can, if there was direction and an action from the Planning Commission and the Town Council to approve this development, that's something that could be conditioned for final plat. Also, we've got most issues resolved, but probably some outstanding issues and kind of nitpicky stylistic stuff that have to do with staff's comments on the PUD guide document. Again, that's kind of the zoning and land use and development control that will govern this development that staff and the town have to enforce over the years. So it's really important for us that language in that PUD guide and also the design guidelines is something that we can interpret and enforce. Housing guidelines, as I mentioned, the applicant has been very proactive in meeting with the Eagle County Housing and Development Authority, just to, so we all understand their housing plan and how it will work in reality. And we've got some ideas on maybe how to strengthen that plan. I'll let Jenna and Allison maybe talk about that tonight or at the next hearing. But we're still working on that. I think we're in a good place. Again, as it stands, it meets or exceeds the town's requirements. So I think they're in a good place with that. I think we need some follow-up from the town's consultant reviewing the applicant's consumptive water use analysis. So we'll kind of bird dog on that and make sure that the applicant gets feedback from the town's water consultant on that. Same thing, maybe Allison and Jenna can update us on the sanitary sewer analysis. That's something that Eagle River Water and Sanitation is going to be requiring. I don't know if that's being worked on now or if they've already received that. And then some external referral agency comments. Madison did a good job of trying to capture some of these. Colorado Parks and Wildlife had some extensive comments. A lot of those had to do with kind of global policy issues that we're starting to see from Devin Duval with Colorado Parks and Wildlife. Some of the same kind of comments came with Minturn North PUD preliminary plan from CPW. Just kind of cautioning the town, cautioning everybody in this valley that wildlife in our valley is really under threat. And to be, thinking about, as we're entertaining additional growth in our towns, how we can work with CPW in the future to somehow lessen the impact on wildlife. But there were some, more specific comments that had to do with, as this project sits next to or near some trailheads and some public land, working with the HOA to educate homeowners and use of signage and things like that within the project. Fencing that's used in the project, making sure that's wildlife compliant, making sure that covenants and education within the PUD and the neighborhood is talking about the right things with regard to conflicts with wildlife, bears in particular. They had some comments on stormwater drainage systems. And then they also recommended a seasonal construction closure, which I thought was fairly unusual. Usually with projects that are, kind of in the hinterlands or out, surrounded by more open space and more pristine wildlife habitat or wildlife movement corridors. That's a comment that we're used to seeing on the planning side of things. Was surprised that they made that comment for this project, which is infill surrounded by other residential uses. But that's only my commentary. I think that's something that the Planning Commission would need to decide. And so they're recommending a closure during the winter months to protect wildlife in kind of that critical winter period. And that would be a time when I guess construction would not be allowed. Colorado Geologic Survey, they're talking about requiring groundwater monitoring and observation. Kumar and Associates should review the currently proposed PUD and provide documentation confirming the validity of or modifying their recommendations, specifically regarding the underground parking structure. The Eagle River Watershed Council had comments regarding drainage and wetlands impacts, both on and off site. And then encouraging the town to consider the impacts of more people living in town on the Eagle River and public open spaces, and to really look at their policies concerning long-term cost to the taxpayer of trying to maintain and upkeep of those areas and dealing with, again, kind of similar to CPW's comments, the more people that move into our towns, the more impacts there's going to be. So really not something specific to this development, but just a heads up that these agencies are really starting to pay attention to these things, and they'd like the towns to think about them as well. Xcel Energy provided comments, and I think they're working with the applicant on the final designs for gas and electric utilities. The Fire Protection District did review the site plan. I don't know that they had any particular comments. The Water and Sanitation District, again, they're looking for a hydraulic analysis. Perhaps Jenna and Allison can fill us in on where they are with that. The county had a lot of comments. A lot of their comments, kind of like CPW and the Watershed Council, in my opinion, were kind of more policy and 30,000 foot level. They encouraged the town and the applicant to really look at the development in terms of the county's sustainable communities initiatives. They had comments on the open space and how important that is. Eco-transit, they had comments on the project's proximity to existing bus stops and how it can be served in the future. Housing, they had comments on the housing plan, and then a lot of comments related to design of the project, construction of the units, and how they can be energy efficient. They've encouraged the town to adopt the 2021 building code, which I don't think we're quite there yet. But also a lot of comments pointing towards the county's climate action plan. So, and then the school district, they did respond. They are requesting that the town require a fee in lieu of land dedication. Usually when a project comes in and a jurisdiction has an ordinance in place that requires a fee in lieu, either land dedication for the school, but most often the school says, no thanks, we don't need the land, but we do need the cash. And so there's a calculation based on the number of students that could be generated by a development. And then there's a cash payment, usually, I think it's at building permit. In this case, the town doesn't have that ordinance adopted. They're working towards that, but there's not. So at this point, anything that's negotiated would be voluntary. So nevertheless, the school district did make their calculations and did propose that the town exact that fee. So potential variation request. So as I mentioned, the open space, recommended open space for PUDs in the town is 25% of the total acreage. And I think we're somewhere south of that at 17.5% for this development. The applicant has responded with their referral response to the town with justification and rationale for why they are not meeting that and why it's important for their development in context to some other goals that they have for the project and some other town policy goals. Lot size requirements are, as I mentioned, the whole idea with a PUD or most PUDs is maybe to break away from the typical minimum lot size that would be required in the residential zone district. So they're showing lot sizes that are of varying size and varying lot coverage and impervious coverage for each one of those lots, depending on the unit type. So single family, duplex, townhome. As you may have gotten into the PUD guide and seen how they're kind of laying that out, that's what we're talking about when we're talking about flexibility and creativity in a PUD. We would expect to see that. Different lot sizes that don't necessarily conform to the town's minimum lot size or building and lot coverage. Same thing with setbacks, building height on the multifamily parcel or the triplex units that are proposed on top of a parking garage. Those are proposed at 35 feet. The height limit in the residential zone district right now is 28 feet. So that's an obvious variation that they're asking for. Building height calculation method, a little bit different than how the town does it. I expect we'll talk about that tonight. But at this point, staff is recommending that the applicant fall back on the town's method of calculating building height. And if there are proposed single-family townhome or duplex structures that are exceeding 28 feet, that we just handle that the same way as the triplex and ask for a variation to building height, whatever that is, if it's 29 feet or 30 feet, rather than doing kind of a averaging of building heights for each one of these things. So that's something that I expect we'll talk about tonight. And then landscape requirements. In the staff report, I talk about the town code and how it normally would apply to a single family or duplex development. And it's based on the size of a lot. I think it's 1 tree per 1,000. So I think by our calculations, several of the lots in this PUD would, if you apply that standard, would require 2 trees. What we've been presented with is 1 tree per lot and 2 shrubs per lot. So staff has looked at that in combination with the landscape that's already, or excuse me, also proposed for some of the open space, particularly the park and some other open space areas, the area around the parking garage and the triplexes. If you look at it in aggregate, I think the applicant has made a good case that they're meeting or exceeding the landscape requirements. And that's something that I think staff is generally in support of. And the other thing with that is that the individual homeowners, when they buy their single family or their duplex, they're going to be able to plant additional shrubs and trees with HOA approval. So it's kind of a bare minimum. And I think it actually equates to just about the same effect as far as the intent of the landscape regulations. So I bet you guys are really tired of listening to me talk.
Good job.
Well, it's a lot to get through. I really appreciate your attention to this. So in summary, we feel as staff that the concept plan, we know that it was supported. There were recommendations that you provided the applicant, and I think they took a lot of those to heart. And in some instances, they may have said, we hear you, but we're going to stick with our plan, and here's our justification for sticking with what our concept is. And I'll let them explain some of those things. But again, I think they did a really nice job of responding to the concept review and the recommendations that came out of it. They've taken a lot of those things to heart, and they provided a very complete application back in November. So again, the town, I've got a note there that says we've received sufficient levels of information and plans necessary to review conformance and make positive findings. That's really what we're doing tonight, is to really go down to that level. All the criteria that I went through earlier, that's what you should be focusing on. Those criteria for PUD preliminary plan findings, and whether or not the development does result in something better than a typical conventional zone district and standards would allow for. And I guess lastly, we are recommending approval with conditions. At this point, we've kept those conditions fairly boilerplate. They are basically saying the applicant shall work with the town attorney or the town engineer or the town staff to address issues related to any of the stuff with the PUD guide that we'd like to still see changed. The HOA covenants, I think we're mostly there with the HOA covenants. But there may be a few outstanding issues or nitpicky things that we need to change. The town engineer has some things that he'd like to see the applicant follow up with. So those are the conditions. I'm going to back up one slide and just review the options for the Planning Commission, whether it happens tonight or at a subsequent hearing. The alternatives are to approve the preliminary plan, approve it with conditions, which we typically expect, or deny the application. You also have the ability to continue the review of this to a date certain. So with that, I am going to stop and ask if you have any questions of me. Otherwise, I'll turn it over to the applicant and make sure that someone's, I think we're going to turn the screen over to Jenna so she can walk you through their presentation.
No questions from anybody? Would anybody like a 5-minute break before we get into the next section?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Yes.
Let's take a 5-minute break. Let Scott have some water and we'll be right back.
Thanks. Madison, Jenna, are you still online?
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Sorry, Jenna. I didn't mean to interrupt your break. Are you gonna want to tee something up here?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yep.
I'll stop
I'm just gonna
sharing and,
grab a glass of water.
okay.
Yeah.
Madison, can you hear me?
I can.
So we're still waiting for 4, or is everybody there?
I do not see Elliot. So I think we're just waiting for Elliot to come back.
Okay. There he
Okay.
is.
I think we have everybody.
Okay. Let's restart the meeting. Jenna, would you like to start?
Well, I thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Jenna Skinner. I'm at 922 Main Street here in Minturn. And I am the planner that's been working on this project for years now. And so happy to be on the team that's presenting this new project to Minturn. I wholeheartedly feel that this is going to be a great addition to the town of Minturn. And I can show you what we have and talk about what, reflecting upon what Scott had said about certain points that we're still working on. And I wanted to just reiterate, although it sounds like a litany of things, the majority of things that we're working on are really small technical details that really pertain to the final plan and the plat. And we have no worries that we will be able to do everything that we need to get done. So rest assured, our team also has Dave Anderson of Timberline Engineering, and he is on this call as well. So we have who we need to talk to, who have the answers. And with that, I am going to begin with my little presentation. All right. And here we go. First of all, we'd like to welcome you to Belden Place. Belden Place is a name that comes from an historical reference to the mining that happened at Gilman. We are very rooted in being in South Minturn, which I'm part of South Minturn right down the street. In addition to that, you know, with the rich history of Minturn, we love it, we embrace it. And we also embrace what's been happening over the last few years as far as architecture and such. And with that, I will give you a trip down to Belden. You can see on the, and everyone can see, correct? It's all working? Yes, excellent.
Yes.
The site is comprised of 6 properties, just shy of 3 acres, about 2.7 acres. The Belden Place PUD, what we're trying to do is not just present a new development, we are creating a comprehensive neighborhood, probably the first new neighborhood that's come into Minturn in decades. Not only that, if you compare to some of the previous ones, we're looking at Taylor Street townhomes, not quite the same animal. This is really an extension of what's here historically and really embracing what was on the ground and what's been developing, you know, piecemeal through time and so forth. This is adjacent to National Forest lands on the south end. And then to the east is the Forest Service property with some trailer homes. There used to be a lot more on there. And then to the right, we get some regular old South Minturn residential neighborhoods. It's a 3-minute drive to get downtown. I'm at 922. This is address beginning at 1200. I walk this way to the Boneyard quite frequently, and I walk downtown on a daily basis when the weather's nice, just to see what's going on in the neighborhood. So this is extremely walkable. I love Minturn for that fact, and we wanted to make sure that those elements are included in this. And our goal for this project is really aimed at locals. We're not trying to build luxury. I always say to people, it'd be a lot easier if we were, but that's not what Minturn needs. And what we need is to have quality housing that's available for people to buy, and not old housing that they're going to just tear down and rebuild, because that really pushes things out of alignment. But really, to offer built houses, we are not only doing all the planning for this property, we are actually doing the construction as well. So by the end of this project, there will be actual physical units bequeathed to new owners. So what is Belden Place? As I mentioned, it's one of the first comprehensive neighborhoods to really be constructed in Minturn in decades. We really want to have the workforce living here. We are exceeding the deed restricted, or sorry, the resident occupied units. The code asks for 20, we're doing 50. We also have 10 deed restricted units at this point in time. We're also doing a third level, which are buyer restrictions, and that's purposeful. We're trying to get, in the first 30 days of having these homes for sale, Minturnites get the chance to buy. Only Minturn people. After that, within the next 30 days, Eagle County residents that qualify per our guidelines and with the Housing Authority's guidelines, they get a chance to, if they want to move out of Edwards and they want to be up Valley, now's their chance to move to Minturn, because there's really not a lot of opportunity these days to move into our town. And there's a lot of people that I know, my friends and so forth, who love Minturn, would love to be here, but they just can't break in. We have a variety of housing types, which I think is extremely important. We have single families, we have duplexes, we have triplexes, we have a fiveplex, we have a different configuration with stacked flats, which I love, which is an old way to do units, but not very common up here to the same degree that I'm used to from the East Coast. All our units have personal outdoor spaces, and all the homes have garages. I think that's very important. We also have our own Central Park space, which is great. We're also trying to decrease permeable spaces by using grasscape that you can park on that holds a car, but also lets the water drain through. And we're doing in our multifamily at the back, we're doing a whole parking garage underneath, and those are expensive. And we're doing that because we don't want to have a litany of cars, or we call a sea of parked cars that are outside. And you see that very commonly in Minturn, where there's a lot of people trying to live in one unit. And that's not what we're going for. We're going for a really spacious neighborhood design. Belden Place and Minturn. What did 2020 tell us? 2020 accelerated the need for workforce housing faster than anyone expected. Obviously, no one saw a pandemic coming. It was always really tough to find an affordable unit or an attainable unit in Minturn. And 2020 just kind of killed our expectation for have anything available for our workforce. Down Valley or even there, I just saw a house came up today for sale in gypsum, an older house, $750, and you never would see that in gypsum, especially on older construction. And people were going down Valley because things were available. Even that's not necessarily true anymore. This blitz that was created, we have a demand that far exceeds what we have as available. So we're seeing in the real estate market, people are buying units and houses they wouldn't normally been drawn to in the past. So for instance, if you are an upper economic ability to purchase in the more luxury category, that's where you were aiming. Now that's not happening anymore. They're buying older homes, tearing them down and building them right back up again, faster than we've ever seen. When that happens, and this is what's happening in Minturn, and actually the house that you saw earlier today is right down the street from me, and I've walked by it every day. That lot in particular was sold for $650,000, and now they're going to tear it down and rebuild it, which pushes a rebuild over $1 million, just like that. And that's what we're up against here. So we're really trying our darndest to create this neighborhood that has a really quality of place to offer a quality of life for, maybe it's the last key in the door. I don't know. We don't know what's going to happen down the road, but we do know that it's important to us to do what we're doing. And you can see there's an article here, just as from May 19th, that Frisco is about to declare an emergency because they can't find enough housing for people who are not guests or coming here to recreate, that their workforce is dying because no one can find a place to live, as an example. So when I say that we have a lot to still do, of course we do. We've actually exceeded what is typical of a preliminary plan as far as the level of detail that we're at. Sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad. In this case, we feel that it's a good thing. I believe the staff also feels that we have enough ingredients in what we're offering to move forward. A lot of the stuff, as I mentioned, are things that can be changed. For instance, there were a couple of things brought up in the PUD guide. One was I found a correction here. We changed the housing plan, which we're in talks with, and so forth. Like a lot of it's a little stuff that's not going to hold us back in any iota. Some things we have to just simply wait on, and we can't prove to the 100th degree of what we have going because we don't know what we're going to be approved for. So until we do, we're kind of hanging on the answers so that we can share that with the Eagle River Water and Sanitation District, for instance. So we realize we've done a lot of work. We realize we have only really a little, we're on the other side of the hill as far as how much information we have to give back. And we know we'll be successful, but we also need your help in being successful. And that means we truly hope that you support our project and we maintain the number of proposed units. Density equals attainability. We lose a unit, price goes up. Someone, that's just the basic math. We could really jam units on this lot if we were of that mindset to really amp up the density, but we wanted to respect the harmony with the neighbors, the harmony about how Minturn is developed over time and so forth. And so we didn't go that way, but we do know that there is a threshold and we're really close to that. So we hope that you will respect that. We are partnering with Eagle County Housing Authority, and they kind of came in a little bit late into the party, but what they brought was a really nice bottle of champagne to enhance the metaphor, whereas they are always excited to have someone propose units that can be used for our valley. And again, we are exceeding expectations at this point, exceeding the housing plan that was just approved. And with their help, we might be able to make an even better plan. Potentially, we've been talking about some gap financing so they can pay down some of the costs to put on deed restricted units. We'll see how that rolls when we get the numbers, but that's just one example because we have a threshold that we have to maintain, our costs, building materials are rising and so forth, but if a little extra money coming in, fantastic, we can deed restrict more units. Our approved variations, we need to have that support, including the 7% reduction in open space. We have lot size reductions on several lots because we are creating historically sized lots that are less than 5,000 square feet in size, because we know that smaller lots also have a direct relationship with the affordable nature of attainable housing. And not all the way through, just on a few lots, we have to modify some of the building impervious coverage just because it's not a 5,000 square foot lot. It's a much smaller lot. So we have to look at the relationship between the scale of the home and what's on the ground. And that will require some variations. We also have some heights when you're trying to have garages integrated into the buildings and of a small house. Sometimes you got to go up just a smidgy versus going out. So those are some of the examples. no more additional fees. We're really trying our best. We've talked to the school district and we haven't heard back from them, but we're open to working with them. We are fronting all the costs on the roads and infrastructure now, and we're also going to privately maintain this. So this project, maybe the first project in a long time that is costing the town little in the world. They're not taking over anything from us. They're just providing water. Eagle River Water and Sanitation District will provide sewer, and that's pretty much it. We're maintaining the roads. We're maintaining the park spaces. Speaking of that, our open space area right now, it's pushing towards $1 million just to have the open space and landscaping that we're proposing. So put that in your brain too, that with your help, we can kind of make this happen for our locals. And really, we only need 15 more taps. We already have 15, and not every single building requires a tap. And we can talk about that a little bit later, but we just want to know that this is actually pretty responsible too. And that the town, the good news is the town has existing taps that can help our project. So at this point in time. Now, what we're looking at on the screen here, this is the historical, those hot pink lots are what we bought when we brought the project in. And I wanted to show you guys a couple of things just to see what we're doing and how we're doing things in the relative nature of the rest of Minturn. So this is what we bought. These are the units that we had. I went to downtown. This is Meek, Pine, Boulder, and Man, a couple blocks there. When we overlay that, we kind of see that, wow, okay, so South Minturn historically and historical of downtown really kind of go together. Obviously, the buildings are bigger in historical downtown as far as bulk and size, but generally they take up, relatively similar landscape. And so what we're doing, I put us in there too. We're coming in. We have a little bit of a wider footprint than old downtown, but we have also an incredible amount of space going around the buildings as well. And even if we squished it in, we're keeping on track of what was there on our property, what is relative to north of us in downtown, and then what we're proposing. And I could stare at this all day because a picture says 1,000, words to me. And this really feels like we are not reinventing the wheel. We are just trying to bring something a little bit newer into an old place in South Minturn. This is our landscape plan that I drew up just to show you more in a colored spectrum what it's going to look like. And I wanted to correct staff where we're offering 1 tree per 1,200 square feet, not 1 per lot, because we do have small lots, and and keeping with Firewise code and so forth, sometimes those small lots just can't really hold a lot of trees. And so because we are doing a smaller lot, we are proposing shrubs. And historically on this property, the lilac bushes were 15 feet tall, and those are almost like trees. And given the chance, those shrubs will be able to grow and mimic kind of the effect of the greening of a tree. And that's what we think is really important here. Sometimes, it's a shame because we have a lot of huge pine trees, and I know we cut down, Scott's given us grief over time, cutting down those huge ones at the Christensen's house. But these trees will also fill in and they will grow. And we're fortunate we had a second look at this landscaping plan by a local grower who said, Minturn, I think we can recommend even better trees that we know will do even better and will really thrive in this area. And that's kind of great because we don't really have a huge tree diversity in Minturn, let alone South Minturn. So we feel that this is pretty good. And like I said, the shrubs will also act as privacy screens and we'll be able to control them better without the real worry about like fire issues. We're also very fortunate that this particular lot is one of the sunniest lots. I was walking last night at 7:30 heading back from downtown after talking with Larry Stone down at Helen's house. And as we were coming back, this property still had sunshine on it at almost 8 o'clock, and the rest of the town was in shadow. So this is a really great property for solar, which is great because we have a lot of roofs. People want to put solar on their properties. This should take very well. And hopefully, you know, we get things growing. It'll green right back up again. So we want to just to go through the fun stuff now, which is the architecturals, and we kind of have a walkthrough. So you'll see these slides coming up, and we're going to take a trip on foot at a pedestrian level, going through Belden Place. And what I did was in the pictures, you'll see where the picture is kind of being looked at and the direction that the person would be looking, just to help you out, because it's not a virtual walkthrough. I can't manipulate it. I can just, they're just stills. So, and here we go. So this is approaching the Belden Place. Obviously there's no trees in the background, just hillsides. And that you see that very typical of architectural programs at this point, but we did draw some trees in that we're proposing. Right immediate to the right, over here, that's the Christensen house, which is already built. And then we kind of pull into our new site. There's our sign. It's going to be right on the corner there. Some single families that face the street. So we have 360-degree architecture. So we have two fronts on all our buildings that face Highway 24 and our internal roads, which is important. When the Christensen house came in, it was decided that the side of the house, if you can see my mouse up here, this is actually the front setback versus front door setback. So they did the same thing. So we're keeping in alignment, making it very friendly with all our street views, even if it's looking onto the highway. And we're coming in. As we come down the road, we're now looking at you see the arrow up on the upper left-hand corner. This is our 5-plex. This is a really impressive building. It offers a lot of different square footages and so forth with internal and external, and some of the units are separated by staircases, and it's it's a very neat building. And much like we've seen earlier today, we do have some rooftop patios as well to really capitalize on the views that we have. So we're offering, you may not have a huge yard, but you have your own space to call your own and really enjoy and love what's going on in Belden. And that's another looking down on it. As we're walking through, you can see we have sidewalk on one side of the street, because and just to put the things into perspective, our estimations, if we have a maximum amount of bedrooms and things, it's only really like 123 people. This is not 1,000 people. This is only 123 people. And hopefully most of the people that are in here are already from Minturn, or a large majority thereof. So walking down the street here, looking over on our side, we got a nice triplex going on. We're looking at our multifamily at the back, and we have significant landscaping that will really affect that view corridor. So even if we're asking for a little bit of a height variation, it's such kind of a linear property that you don't really see it to the extent you would if it was right at the front of Main Street. Here's looking back on the 5-plex, and this is part of our park area, the open space, where we kind of naturally build it, climbing rocks, park benches, something for everybody to be there. You can watch your kids play, you can meet up with a friend, and so forth. And everything is to scale. Another view, all the kids playing. And now we're coming towards our second kind of pork chop in the middle of the road here. And you can see these are the larger multifamily on the pedestal, with the underground parking is in the back here. And then over here, these are the single families that are shown on the ground plan, looking that way. And then here's our 30, that's actually not even 35 feet. It's a little bit, it's less than that, but we just put 35 feet as the height limitation. One more. You can start to see where this car is parked on the grasscape, and that we think that's going to be really nice to not have a sea of asphalt everywhere, especially in a tighter location. So as we're kind of psyched on that aspect. These are the duplexes. If you can tell the arrow, it's kind of we came from over here, now you're looking back. And this is so the Mountain Street's on the other side, a couple of properties over. Another view. Also note that we're trying to minimize our impervious space as much as we can, and we are going to do whether they're completely concrete strips or more of the grasscape. This is recommended to us. I believe that it's personally that it's probably the best way to do that. And that way we can really have our drainage and snow melt and so forth do what it needs to do, which is go back into the ground. This is our multiplex. So we do have a few extra guest spots out front, but that's what they're for. They're not for, resident parking at any stretch. Hopefully this will be largely empty most of the time. There is a parking garage that you go down underneath, and then everybody always has a deck. There's no landlocked units. There's a central courtyard in between. There'll be planters also there too. So we'll green up the hardscape as well with extra landscaping, so to speak. It'll just be in containers or raised beds. Moving around the corner here, on this side, it's the single families. And then we have our little duplex guy. Here's our little single family. And these ones are shorter. They're not as tall as some of the other ones. And that plays well with view corridors from the multifamily. And there they are again. And we're just moving down the street here. So we're actually facing Highway 24 at this point, Main Street. Coming around. There's another look. Just turn your head to the left now and you're looking at the fiveplex. I feel like a tour guide. And then here's the other side of the single families that face Main Street or Highway 24. And like I said, there's this on the end units, there's always something really nice and architectural about the buildings. And they have a front on each side, so there is no back facing any street. That's a little bit of a bigger picture of what's happening. And then I did single out the units if you guys want to go back and talk about them just for our own. I'm not going to reinvent the wheel here. And yeah, so that is Belden Place. I think that it's going to be better to have a conversation about this now. We're not going to and really address what Scott has suggested that we address as they come up, or questions, if that's the way you want to go. And so with that, I will open up to any of my team if they want to say anything. Probably you should meet Allison at a minimum. She is
Hi.
a wonderful addition to the team. She came in after I had started this with another portion, and she really brings in a lot of experience with looking at the financials, the overhead and the building costs, and trying to make this work. Which is something that I am grateful that I don't have to do. I just try to argue about making it work. So Allison, if you want to say hey.
Yeah, hi, I'm Allison Perry. Yep, yes, ma'am.
State your name and address. Thank you.
Yep, Allison Perry. I live in Brush Creek Terrace in Eagle. I'm working with the owners. The owners are a couple who have the LLC Miners Base Camp, and they live in the valley. And so this was a project that they wanted to do, and to try to create as much attainable housing as possible. One of the members of the couple was a single parent in the valley and knows how hard it is to find housing or to buy a house, especially if you're a single working person. So we're trying to walk the fine line between the incredible costs right now, land costs in Minturn, infrastructure, and then the construction materials, and then also try to keep the prices so that they are attainable. And then working with Eagle County on possibly expanding that through some of the programs that they have. So we've tried to create something that's, not cookie cutter, that you don't see all over the valley. I like for every place to have windows on, at least 3 sides. There's no, things that are all stuck together, apartments, things like that. So, so we did a whole variety of product in working with Jenna about Minturn, just realizing that, the variety is what Minturn needs. And then I particularly love single level living. So that's why we did the stacked triplexes in the back. So each floor of that is 1 unit. And those have an elevator. So all of those are ADA ready. All the ones that are served by the elevator over the podium, which is also, I worked with quite a few families in the valley that had disabled children or a disabled parent they were taking care of, and it was almost impossible to find something. So, so anyway, I'd rather hear your questions than I know too much about this. So I'd just love to hear from you, hear your overall feedback to start with, and then if you want to dig into some nitty gritty details, there's plenty of them.
Jenna, is there anybody else from your team you'd like to introduce?
Dave Anderson is here. If you have any engineering questions, Dave is when working really hard, trying to make everything mesh. That includes the preliminary or tentative design for the regional drainage plan. He's been working with Jeff on a couple other things as well for the project. And that is one correction I wanted to make. That's it. The staff report says we have a 3-foot sidewalk. We don't. It's actually a 4-foot sidewalk, which is accepted by the town engineer. Additionally, he is also a structural engineer, which is really rare. And he was a participant in the design of the drainage and the house for the Christensen. So he's been involved right from day one. As soon as I was on the project, I actually invited him to join me on the trip down to Belden Place. So he's been there since the beginning and really understands the technical difficulties that we have overcome, and what we need to do to keep going. Generally speaking, I asked him, Dave, do we need any real variations on any of our engineering? He's like, no, we're pretty much 99% meeting all code standards, with the exception that town recommended a 5-foot sidewalk. We went with a 4. There's a couple of little things here and there, but I think that Dave is pretty confident and he can speak up if he desires on where we're going and how we get there. But I really appreciate our team that we have. So Dave, you're welcome to say hi, Dave, if you so choose.
He's not choosing.
Yeah, so
There he is.
thanks,
Dave,
Jeff.
please state your name and address.
Dave Anderson, PO Box 842, Carbondale, Colorado. And thanks, Jenna, for bringing me on this project. I can't thank you enough. It's been a fun ride. And I think we really have all the engineering stuff sorted out. There's a few things that we need to deal with, but nothing insurmountable. And sewer district is kind of the big thing for me, but they'll be getting some new plans here in the next few days. Otherwise, I think we're kind of on track with everything other than the drainage. Getting across Highway 24 is going to be really important.
Okay, shall we start? Who would like to start first? Tom, would you like to?
Sure. Right off the bat, Jenna, Allison, obviously your objective that you're shooting for, which is noted throughout multiple counties, as far as pushing for something that's for the average Joe, if you will. We're getting there, and I appreciate the work you guys have done with it. And going to rattle off a few things, and there's a variety of embedded questions in here. Routinely we keep talking about town objectives, and one of them is the old phrase, keep Minturn, the funky eclectic style, etc. Realistically, if we reference the most recent response from Tory Franks, Eagle County's real estate development manager, what does that actually mean anymore from the town perspective? And I ask that in a broader question, not only of this commission, but obviously the town council, et cetera, particularly from a standpoint of affordability that you are pursuing, rightfully so. So obviously the modification you made right off the bat in regards to the 50% resident owned. But that said, the AMI calculation that we have in the town versus what the county has, it brings up the question and debate. And obviously you have your own profit margins to meet as well. So really, as we go down this road and discuss this development and other ones that are in the pipe as well, as to whether our math is correct, specifically to meet the objective of what we all are at least paying lip service to right now, which is trying to bring in full-time residents, meet the demands of regular residents, working stiffs, if you will, and what that equates to mathematically as far as the price of a home. And I'll just reference what Tori put in there, which I think is going to change. And the question over to you guys, obviously question one, is the cost margin that you're looking at now in regards to these construction costs, which are 20, 30, 40%, depending on the materials you're talking about, and starting your build shortly, one, the duration of time for the build versus a delay to allow the market to settle. And couple that with that timeline and how it relates currently to Eagle River Water District completion timeline for that next lift station. So I'll stop there for a second if you want to address that and then move on to the next question.
Yeah, as far as timing and infrastructure and building, so what we would like to accomplish is to get all the infrastructure in this summer, early fall, and then get the this podium, oh yeah, I don't have a mouse, get the stacked tries in the back done first, and then the houses behind the Christensens. So what we're looking at is, in order to do this, the housing program, is that we would go on a reservation system. So people in Minturn get dibs on their first set of numbers in the reservation system. People in Eagle County get second dibs in the reservation system, and then we'll build those houses. So those reservations, we'll have to lock in a price with the cost that we can, secure. And we'll just have to commit to it, whether it works for, whether the costs keep going up or not. They've gone up 200% in the last 4 months. So I'm hoping that they will start. I've heard that they're going to start stabilizing. But when that price will get locked in for that buyer when they convert from reservation to contract. So that's how we'll manage that. So we're hoping to do that whole section, all of the infrastructure at one time, and then the vertical construction of those in the back and behind the Christensens first. So that's how we'll manage that. Now we're also doing everything that's not the stacked, everything that's not on lot 7 will be done. The basements, if that's an option, and the garage level will be stick built, and then the other parts of the units will be brought in modular. So that helps us control those costs, because they will give us, they add on to the cost, but they lock it in and promise it to us. So we'll have some controls there, so we'll know what those are going to be. And then of course we do the add on the decks and the trims and all the different pieces on site also. So that's how we're working to manage the cost and the fluctuation, because it's just up and down every day right now.
Right. And then to answer some of your other questions, Tom, so that really speeds things up. So, and I wanted to clarify just 1 second, the infrastructure and the foundations by this fall, so that we can place homes on it during the winter or into the spring and so forth. And we've been talking to companies for quite a while now. So this is not that we're not about to approach them and figure out how much it's going to cost to do these. Allison is working directly with the builders, the internal builders that will bring them out, except for the multifamily. The stack flats adds a tremendous cost because of the way that they're created with the fire separations for the floor and the elevators. By the way, the elevator of of the multifamily is a large part holding up the Excel electricity and gas, because they want to know where the meters are going to go, which until we know that we're approved, we can't really tell them where the meters are going to go. So it's kind of one of those catch-22 situations, just for the record. But the timeline it should be pretty quick, because once the foundations are in, then we can just pop the buildings up and then, get those to fruition. I actually had a house in the Bluffs in Eagle made by the same company that these are being made, and it was bomber. I mean, the interior walls were insulated. You couldn't, the sound quality was unheard of. Excuse the pun. And they were extremely energy efficient. I hardly in Eagle, I was south facing. I had maybe turned my air conditioning on twice a summer because they were so efficient. So I'm really pleased with that Allison just happened to have a relationship. Allison's also working in a giant development in gypsum. So she's pretty versed in larger subdivisions and smaller subdivisions and the building and contracting thereof. So hopefully that'll help. But yeah, to your point on the housing question, I mean, we're not going backwards. There's no way a private developer can offer an 80% AMI anymore without a jurisdiction having the land or anything like that. So we're doing the very best we can. We are not making giant profit margins. If we were doing luxury, we could probably still get away with it because the cost just goes up in relation to the market. We're trying our darndest to keep things down with certain concessions that we have to make, and largely that's just keeping that density as it is. It was a little bit more tenuous without the housing authority coming in and offering to help maybe buy down. And the reason, and maybe Scott wants to talk about that in a different way, is this is the first project that's really utilizing the new housing program. And so there's going to have to be a learning curve with town council going, hey, this is what you approved, but is this really what you want, to your point? And I envision that housing plan is probably going to change. I think Article 26 is going to have to be modified because of these conversations that are coming out because of Belden Place. And we hope so, because we agree with you. Like I said, we believe in locals. It's my biggest fear. It's how I got on the planning commission when I was appointed by the town council. I keep seeing people moving out of town, and the people that are moving in are not the same type of family makeup generally as we had a majority. It's slowly shrinking. Tom, you weren't here. We were doing our concept plan, but I did a study back comparing Minturn about from 05 to now, and we actually lost 76 units over time because a lot of them were mobile homes that got so old that had to be removed. And so someone would buy a lot with maybe 3 mobile homes on it and then put 1 single family home on it. We've also lost a lot of ownership has gone down. CDOT bought a lot of property. The Forest Service actually bought a lot of private property, which I was surprised about. And then we had a lot of people just buying for investment purposes. So ownership is down from locals. And then the third tier that we discovered about what's happening is that the number of Airbnbs and short-term rentals has really grown because of the Airbnb program that never used to be there. And so that's replacing a lot of the permanent local housing as well. And we have a lot more influx. I'm not saying it's bad or good. I'm just saying this is the reality that we're up against. So we're actually replacing the units. We had, when we bought these 3 lots, actually 6 lots, we had started with 12 mobile homes that were actually not very livable, that we tore down immediately. 1 had asbestos in it. The Duran house had 2. We actually pretty much gave away the mobile home that was on the Duran property to some guy in Leadville. So he actually got a screaming deal on a brand new, well, new to him house. The Christensen,
yeah,
that was a modular, yeah.
Yeah.
The Christensen's house, they had 2 buildings on their property, and now they have the 1 consolidated main unit with the ADU. And then at the back of the property where the multifamily sits, there were 3 buildings that was owned by the Dr. Warner. So we're replacing a lot of those buildings. We're actually going from 12 units per acre to 15. It's really not that big of an increase overall. And that's purposeful that we're doing that. But like I said, if that answers your questions, hopefully we can't solve the affordable, attainable housing problem, but we can help to offset some of the impacts that we're experiencing right now, we hope.
Yeah. Yeah, as we move forward, I think, I appreciate the significant number of 50% that can't be discounted in any way as being pretty extraordinary. The AMI calculation, as we move on and you are recalibrating costs, as Jenna or as Allison noted, which are changing almost daily due to this post-COVID supply chain pig in the snake issue. As we move down and talk with council, at a minimum, something that I would like to see is the continuation of the deed restriction through resale process, obviously beyond just point of sale, first time resident, and then go from there. The other issue that was raised that Scott mentioned that I asked Madison to just look at, unfortunately, they aren't PUDs, but in light of the fact that this is, really the canary in the coal mine, as far as the first real PUD in the town of this construct, looking at Minturn Townhomes and Eagle River Enclave, as far as this discussion about recreational space. And I'm not asking for an expansion of it. I think based on what you have, you're doing an awful lot with 2.7 acres. So 25% is probably not realistic because that completely kicks the objective of affordable housing into the river that is across the road. So unfortunately, or fortunately, as I look at it, we don't have the percentage right now. They're different scale as far as acres and so forth. But I think to be realistic, it would be fair to compare those two developments and get that percentage to scale as we move forward, for argument's sake, and nothing more than that. Because as you said, you're really, one of a kind at the moment as we look at it. And obviously Minturn North is the next piece of it. So that said, I would like to see going forward, and this isn't things that need to be answered right now, as the calculus change on the cost analysis, what we can do to continue the march towards affordability. And at the same time, the other objectives as far as the residents, the demographics that we're shooting for. And then obviously the open space piece, because this is obviously setting somewhat of a precedent, as obviously next in the can, maybe not, is Minturn North and possibly other things that we look at. So yeah, that's what I'm looking for. And I don't know if Scott has any interjection on the recreational space piece. I don't think anybody has an answer right now on percentage of those two other developments right now. But that's all I have for now. Appreciate it.
Real quick, I don't have those figures, but we can certainly try to figure those out.
Well, the Enclave, I just walked by it this morning on my morning walk. It's pretty much riverbank and the little tiny buffer between the highway, and everything else is just asphalt. That's the Enclave.
Yeah.
Taylor's
has riverbank. So yep, I'm with you.
Yeah. And then Taylor, you're in Taylor, so you know what's going on up at Taylor Street as far as what they were approved with that density and what they offered. So far, we're the only other little playground in the town. And I did a calculation. Our accumulated green space area is pretty much the size of Little Beach and the amphitheater. And that being said, there's 1,000 people in Minturn per last census using the same size green spaces that we're offering at Belden for 123 people. That's a great comparison. That shows that we kind of have a deficit overall in the town. I would love to see more pocket parks throughout the town. That would make more sense. But for now, if we're used to a little bit of open space.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I did have one side note on that as far as, in the PUD guide, et cetera, and staff responses about not accounting for space that is not yours in your property, i.e. boneyard, forest service, et cetera. But discussions, and I don't know if you've had those or maybe you have in regards to with Forest Service in particular, but obviously just as we look at the other plans to the north, those properties thoroughly blending in and seamlessly transitioning. Granted, you're talking about other private property or public lands, et cetera, but with Forest Service, for example, just like we have townhomes, trailheads, et cetera. And obviously I see your one street that terminates pretty much at the Forest Service property. I don't think there's any existing trail there at the moment, but it would
No.
certainly be once again for public and private land to somewhat flow and integrate together. So if that's an option as we go down the road to talk with them, that'd be super.
Absolutely. And we have, it's actually a pretty significant slope back there. It's not a really desirable place for a trailhead. But if the Forest Service said, hey, we're going to do a nice switchback down there, can we connect to your property? We'd be like, okay. I mean, we're not against it at all.
Well, we need some
your
hard
point.
trails, not just the mini mile.
Right. Exactly. Thank you.
That's all I got. Appreciate it, folks.
Jeff?
Thank you,
are
Tom.
you out
Appreciate
there?
it.
Yes, I'm out here. Thank you. Allison and Dave and Jenna, thank you. That's a great presentation. I guess while we're still on the subject of trails, I'm going to just start there. I know there's rumblings, or there's been rumblings from the Vail Valley Trails Alliance to they've been trying to work towards eventually connecting Malloy Park and the school with a trail system that gets all the way basically to Grouse Creek. And there's a lot of Forest Service land. There's obviously King Ranch and some estate property in between that. And some of that property was discussed way back when in the land swap negotiation discussions that failed. But I think that, the consideration, even though the slope on the rear of the property is steep, there's basically a lot of rogue trails back there now. And they're further up the hill. There's rogue trails that connect between Martine Creek and basically down where Steam Master is. And that's a trail system that's kind of been in place, a rogue trail for a long time. And I think that the feeling over time is that as some of the more infills, PUDs such as this become a reality, and the more people there are to start using, and accessing that land behind them, the more you may see, or the potential for some more rogue trails to pop up. So I think whether or not it's feasible or whatever, because of the topography at the rear of the property, it wouldn't be a bad idea to consider having at least something behind that your multifamily, cutting across the rear of the property, even if it's on the property line, that would allow for connectivity someday in the event that Eagle Valley Trails Alliance and the Forest Service come to an agreement in dedicating some of that property right where it meets housing all the way down. And then it's obviously, as it approaches King Ranch and Claire Beck's property and all of that stuff above town and above the water tower and Frank Medina, and all those estates and unincorporated parcels of land that are kind of in the middle of town up high that some folks aren't even aware that they're there. That trail system could eventually skirt above them and gain some elevation and still find its way across to Grouse Creek. So I just think it might be an important component to consider.
No, it's great. And actually, all our common area allows for pedestrian paths and trails. So if someone were to come in and propose a trail along the back of the multifamily, that's something that the HOA can absolutely work with them to do something like that, and work with whatever we have that built into our system. And I did
Sure.
want to mention to another point, though, going back to both Tom and you, because that kind of inspired me, were we to have a connection to a Forest Service trail. And this is where I think it's a little unfair that we have parking in our open space area, and that can't be counted as an open space contribution. But I say that's a problem, because we are offering parking for people to come here to play here. They're parking, they're using our open space. Or if there was a trail, we have parking as part, of our green space option, and it should be included in that, 25%, in my opinion. I just wanted to bring that up.
Yeah, I'm with Tom for the same reasons that he mentioned. As far as the open space requirement, I don't have a problem with where this development is in relation to it. And I think the scale and in relation to the give and take and the pros and cons of giving 5 or 6% more open space at the expense of losing housing units, I think is a negative in a net result. So I don't have a problem with the open space. I don't really have an opinion as far as the parking being counted into the open space or not, but I tend to lean towards your argument in favor of not counting it. I think generally some of the biggest questions I have that I think maybe some of the public or may require the most discussion here, I think have to do with height and the calculations of height, because the difference between 35 feet and 28 feet is significant. And I'm not saying that I'm for or against either one, but I do think that it's important to have the discussion in the public forum as to why and the reasons for, because I do think that it's pretty precedent setting. But I'm not necessarily throwing, my opinion about it, other than I do think that the scale or the pedestrian scale that we've been speaking of in terms of the 100 block in downtown and some of the proposals or the concepts that we've seen presented as they relate to height downtown, when your building is sitting right on Main Street in the commercial district versus a multifamily unit building at the very back of the property that's 250 feet off of Main Street with a number of units built in front of it. It doesn't have the same mass impact, in my opinion, that's a 4-story building downtown where the shack currently sits is. So I think that there are pros towards and reasons for allowing the height variation. And I just would like to hear, your team's opinion of that, or maybe you present why you need to do that versus sinking it further into the ground, etc. So that would be one thing that I think should be addressed. I don't know. I'm not, Lynn, this is probably more in your neck of the woods, but I love the concept overall of the, less impervious in the driveways and these, pervious pavers and all that kind of stuff. I'm just playing devil's advocate for the minute of how do you get grass to grow in those areas in a drought where Eagle River wants us to not water our lawns, and the drought is getting worse, and the soils in Minturn frankly suck. And, if you're not going to irrigate the hell out of these areas and you're going to be driving on them, I just am skeptical as to how green they're really going to look someday if you're not pouring a ton of water on it all the time. And I think it looks great on paper, but I'm just told of how it, if it was in Georgia or South Carolina or, somewhere that was super humid and moss grows on everything all the time, that would be one thing. But we live in an arid, I was in Grand Junction this past weekend and I saw a lot of xeriscaping of houses that had nothing but rocks and cactus and things that can grow with very little water. And so I guess I just would hate for the end result to just be kind of brown dirt everywhere and everybody scratching their head as to why it didn't look the way we wanted it to. And then as far as the density goes, I don't have a problem with the density at all. I do think that your overlay was representative and helpful in showing kind of the densities of other parts of town. And I truly believe this is just an extension of town pushing further south and finally infilling its way down. And I don't really feel like any of this is over dense. I think it's very, responsible and respectfully done. I question the scale a little bit of some of the buildings when it comes to height and how that, is going to be perceived or what some of the public comments are going to be about that. Other than that, generally, there was so many comments that came back on referral comments that it was a little mind-boggling. And I found myself, because this is the first guinea pig PUD since I've been on the board for a while of this magnitude that's come through, with the exception of Battle Mountain, which was massive. And we were undertaking that. That was really a daunting task. And it seemed like it was going to take years, and it certainly has taken years. But it just, Scott, maybe this is a question more for you than it is for Jenna and her team, but it just seemed like there were so many different comments, even from the last couple documents that got sent from the attorneys and from the Eagle County and from the engineers. And it just seemed like there were so many I's to be dotted and T's to be crossed that, if we're supposed to, if we were to grant approval with the conditions of, let's just leave it up to the staff to dot all the I's and cross the T's, that really seems like it puts a lot of responsibility on very few people, as well as I'm not necessarily sure that promotes the most transparency in the public forum for something as big as this. So I guess that's kind of a open-ended question, but it just sort of seemed like there was a lot of things, especially as things as simple as how do we calculate height and why are we varying from that? I understand that we've had a lot of discussions about averaging and how that's a smart way to do it, because it generally, especially on a PUD of this size, if you take the averages of all the buildings, you generally get a feel for what the whole site looks and feels like. And I'm all for that. But the reality is that's not the way the code reads. And unless we provide a very transparent way of getting that through on this PUD review, then I just want to make sure that that's done out here, even because we're even less public than if we were in person. And I just want to make sure that we're having that discussion in the public forum and not something that you guys are just having, fixed on the back end on a staff level.
Jeff, I
Yeah,
can,
and
oh, go ahead, Allison.
I was just going to say the building height calculation does not span across buildings. It's just within a building. So we were doing a weighted average of a particular building. So it wasn't an average of the whole site. Just to be clear on that.
Okay.
Yeah, and even further, Jeff, because of where we have the way our staircases roll, they're kind of exterior, but they're enclosed. And the typical definition of how you measure height, correct me if I'm wrong, Scott, within the standard code is, midway between the eave and the ridge point. We're like, well, we don't have that kind of combination. We're also using a combination of flat roofs and peaked roofs. And how do you kind of figure that out? I think it's too, whereas the attorney says making staff a hard time, I think it's going to make staff have an easier time as each building comes in and each building is analyzed for height. And we have already said that it's a requirement for us to thoroughly do those height calculations and provide them to staff. We're not relying on staff to come up with the heights. We're doing the work for them and they're just looking at the system. It actually makes more sense than trying to do a 5-plex and that have varying heights and try to figure out what the height is. If it's just a maximum point on that height, that's one thing and we can change it, but then it kind of throws off using the standard. What Scott had suggested is just, well, if it's, the highest point's 32 feet, then just have a 32-foot height, but we don't want to have 32 feet all the way through the building. We just need it for that particular aspect of the building. So you can look at it two ways. We're actually doing it a little bit more conservatively in a way by really tailoring how you do the height and keeping that average down versus doing a linear, here's your plane and here's where you can go. And 10 years down the road, they're like, ooh, let's pop something else higher because we have space, we have airspace to go. And that's going to, push that number, which is not what our intention is. So it's kind of two ways to look at it. And then through a PUD, I think the attorney gave a hard answer when he said, you can't have a different height, but we know that PUDs are a customized zone district. And we have countless examples where they have their own individual way of calculating height. So we know it, the ability is there. And I think that staff is brilliant. So I don't think that they, will not be able to use our program, just want to push that in there.
Flattery will get you nowhere.
I know, but it's cool.
I agree. I agree that that's what this forum is for. And all I guess I'm getting at is that we have the discussion in the forum and in front of the public and come to a resolution on the height and not just sort of brush it by it and let it get resolved internally behind the scenes.
And to your point, Jeff, I don't think staff was intending to do that. That's why we brought building height up as one of those variations or building height calculations as a issue that we did want to talk about. And if you want to talk about it now, I can certainly respond to Jenna's rationale and why we're kind of pushing back on that. And to your point though, if through this process there needs to be some additional accounting as to the number and type of issues that are still outstanding and those issues that we think can be conditioned and resolved before final plan, and those issues that really need to be scrutinized in this forum right now, we can certainly try to do that for the next meeting. This project, I think we all feel fairly comfortable at this point that a lot of the outstanding issues are pretty minor. A lot of them have to do with technical aspects of the preliminary plat, which actually came in as a final plat. So we scrutinized it on a final plat level in some respects, which I guess puts the applicant at an advantage that we've already kind of looked at a final plat level of document, and they've received comments. So they're already working on those things in the event that they can move forward to a final plan and a final plat. Jeff Spinell is on the call, at least he was. The town engineer
still
can
there.
speak to some of those issues that are still outstanding that we need to follow up on. But, this project doesn't have, in my opinion, a long list of outstanding critical issues. We certainly received a ton of referral comments. I don't mean to glaze over any of those, but if the planning commission in reading the referral comments, say, well, what about that CPW recommendation for bear-proof trash containers, or how is that being handled in the covenants? Those are questions we can answer. If it's larger global policy issues that we received from Eagle County or the Watershed Council that you think need to be addressed in this development, then let's talk about that. But again, I don't think we tried to glaze over any of those. I think I hear your point though, and I'd like to hear from the other planning commission members if there's a need for us to come back with kind of a final list of those issues that are outstanding, so you have a better idea. I think we could do that.
Yeah, I mean, it was confusing to us too, Jeff. I mean, I was reading it, and I was in government for a lot of years, and I'd see referral comments come in, and I pushed for them. But when we're getting comments on, well, you need to change something on Martin Creek, and I'm like, Martin Creek trailhead, that's not even on our property. You're talking about stuff that goes beyond our property boundaries. I think it almost read to me personally as an attempt that they haven't had really good conversations with the town in general, and they're just like taking the opportunity to talk about broader issues, but which is, in my opinion, not appropriate as a referral response talking about our project, because it does lead to opening up larger cans of worms, so to speak. And how do we deal with something that doesn't really have anything to do with us? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't have any interest in having those conversations. All of that stuff, in my opinion, when I read some of those referral comments, I was sort of like, obviously we need bear-proof containers. Obviously we know we live in a wildlife corridor. There's so many obvious statements that were made that were just sort of like, really, is that the best we're doing? And that's what you're getting thrown back with, is you got to make sure that everybody needs to have a bear container, and maybe you should not build, when at certain times of the year. Like, I don't know, that it's a lot of those comments are pretty overreaching in my opinion. I'm more concerned with what happens inside, the confines of your property, and how they are affected, affect the neighbors on all sides and affect the town in general. And so, that's why I was just kind of getting at more. I think that the conversation about the height is important and significant, just to make sure that there's, it's been long said in the 20 plus years I've lived here that no one's going to ever allow an enclave to be built again. And the last thing you want, or I want for you or your team or anything, is to have any on anybody's face about some building height that got missed and why.
Sure.
Yeah, and I want to
Appreciate
jump
that.
back, if it's okay, Jeff, to asking why we wanted that. So we wanted to provide garages for all these units. So like those row houses, they have garage on the ground floor. So then your middle floor has your living, dining, and a bedroom. If you didn't have the third floor, you'd have a 1-bedroom, very, very expensive 1-bedroom. So in order to, it was our desire to keep cars out of sight and to, maximize that visual, and then provide the garages, which there are when you go to look for houses in the valley, and then you sort the MLS by garages, it just slices it right down. So our desire to have the garages, which I think, especially in Minturn and Up Valley, is a huge amenity, does create the need that if you're going to have 3 bedrooms, then you need that third story. So yes, we could eliminate garages, but if we do that, we have to park the cars beside them. So then you eliminate a unit. So that's the need for the height there. you know, it just created the ability to do a better product. And
Okay.
it's just on the multifamily, and we're only considering multifamily things over 4 units. So there's just the 2, the lot 7 and that 5-plex. So everything else is at the 28.
Right. And then I'm assuming also that any of your triplexes and all your multifamily and all that stuff, that's all fire sprinkled. It has to be fire sprinkled. And then you obviously need a bigger water tap for all that fire sprinkling and all that stuff.
Just on the things that are stacked units. So everything that's on the back on lot 7 has that requirement.
Don't you need it for triplexes or anything bigger than 2 units as well?
I don't think
No,
you provide fire separation between the units.
I did a triplex years ago, not that long ago, and I had fire separation, and I was still required to have a 2-inch water main and a sprinkler system.
If it becomes part of the building requirement, we'll definitely do it.
Yeah, we checked in with our code specialists, and basically it all depends on how much you put into the separation on the shared wall space. So because there's two options. And so if we went to the maximum option between the units, that alleviates a lot of other restrictions. And the problem, of course, is you need a translator to go through code and tell you, because he's like, you can do this. Oh, but there's an exception over here. And you do this. Oh, there's an exception over here. And it's in this other, like, you have to have that person who really knows their way around to do that. And unfortunately, one of my friends is like that. So it was really just the stack flats. That's the most expensive, but we really need those units because we're doing seniors as allowable in our housing program, which is pretty rare in our whole entire valley, that you can have retirees who want to downsize or buy a unit here, and we can do 1 level with elevator. And then the disabled persons also can be able to use those. But the cost to do the separations between the floor and with the elevator and the sprinklers on that building and the garage definitely puts that price up. But we know it's a product that we need to introduce more readily into this valley and to Minturn specifically.
Yeah. Scott, I mean, anything over 2 units is considered multifamily, correct?
Yeah. Yep. So duplexes and single family are not, and then everything over that is multifamily.
Yeah, and then you just have to engineer, obviously, like Jen is saying, if you're going to work your way out of fire sprinkling requirements, you must be able to demonstrate, I guess, that you're engineering your way out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Jeff, I just went and looked at the internal document that we're using to track all of the referral comments, at least from staff, town engineer, town attorney, planning department, and the responses from the applicant. Madison has been doing heroes work, keeping track of all these different issues and whether they've been addressed. So we have a document that, pretty clearly for our purposes gives us a roadmap of what outstanding issues there are. And, all I can tell you is that what we've highlighted in our presentation tonight, what's highlighted in the staff report, is a fairly accurate representation of the few items in my mind that are still outstanding. A lot of very kind of stylistic or legal comments that had to do with the PUD guide, the design guidelines, the HOA covenants. Most of those have been addressed. Richard's with us tonight. Maybe he can speak to the HOA covenants and the attorney's office comments on the PUD guide and the design standards as well. But there's very few, in my mind, issues that we need to really focus on. Building height calculations was one of them. Definitions and how the PUD guide definitions, or I guess not really in the design standards, but how those translate or match up with the town code definitions. Those are still issues that we'd like to keep working on. We've talked about the drainage and the outstanding nature of that solution, but the fact that we do have I believe, maybe Jeff can speak to this, Jeff Spinell, a solution that could work and that we believe meets the code. There's still some, I think, details to work out on that, but those are things that we look at and say those should be conditioned. They do need to be worked out before final plan and final plat, and certainly they need to be worked out, on the engineering design side before the applicant can provide us with accurate cost estimates, and that'll then go into the subdivision improvements agreement. But I guess my point is we can probably clean that list up if you'd like and present it back to say all of these things have been addressed and here's the few that remain, just so there's that transparency that you're talking about.
No, I mean, I trust that you have a good handle on it. It just seemed like there was a lot presented that way in all of the documents. And to hear that you guys are really confident in the fact that it's a lot further along than that, I'm fine with, and again, 99% of those, nobody can see when they walk by on the street what the HOA document looks like.
Right.
Nobody can see the covenants when they walk by. Nobody can see the problem with the engineering, blah, blah, blah. Like all that stuff is all behind the scenes, important, really nitty gritty stuff that only nerds like Jenna and I love to talk about. But, like that's not what this is for. I'm more concerned with what people can feel and see and bite off, and just generally making sure that those, things are handled. And height and mass and scale, those are the big topics that have been on the docket for a long time. And I just want to understand, and Allison answered the question why very, well, as far as the need and the pros and cons of whether you have a garage or you don't have a garage. And I'm all for having a garage and putting your car in it where nobody can see it, because you do feel that when it's outside. And even though the building might be a few feet shorter, now you're looking at cars, and now you're looking at clutter. It's a much cleaner site to have cars and garages if you can do it. So I think that's a net gain, a net positive. And I just wanted to hear it, as the way I heard it. So I think that's it for now. I trust that you guys are gonna get a lot of that minutia handled. And I love the concept. I don't have any problem with the densities. I think it's going to be a great addition to town. And I think it sounds to me, just my one last comment is going to be, to dovetail off of what Tom was saying about Tori's letter on the housing. I'm assuming because of the timing of this and the fact that I don't see us changing our ordinance in any, kind of time frame that will precede the approval of this and these guys moving forward, if we come to find out that 200% of AMI is completely ridiculous and isn't practical, and no one locally can afford it, Jenna puts these on the market and nobody comes to the party to buy them except for out of towners. The thing that I was looking at in terms of like the cash in lieu of if you're not from here and you want to pay the 2% or the 1%, that, let's just be honest, in this market nationwide, you've got people coming in and standing in line to tour a house, and the house is going for $200,000 over asking price with no, they waive all of the people coming to building inspections, and they weigh their cash deals, and will actually pay for you to stay in the house for 5 months. And I even heard of a house that the family came in and said, we will not only pay $100,000 over your asking price, we will actually buy your next house for you.
That was in Boise, Idaho.
That was in Boise, Idaho.
That's crazy. Yeah, I mean, the housing, we heard that pretty clear from the housing department, and the whole point is that I had a discussion with members of, or a member of, town council. We're just talking about the bigger picture, not the project in general, but just the bigger picture in the world. And one of his goals, which I didn't know, was to create a funding source so that the town could buy down units or contribute to help offset those costs. So that's what the inspiration was. And the housing department said, it's not a bad idea, but it probably should be 5 to 10%. You know what I mean? So you actually generate a significant amount and that only allows them to purchase. It doesn't remove the other 2 deed restrictions. So that's why it's a 3-tier system. It only gets them in the door. That's it. And then they pay money to the town, so the town gets an offset benefit. I still think it's a good program to start generating funds because of how difficult it is for the private industry to provide attainable or affordable housing without help. That's all I was thinking about it. And it gave Minturn an opportunity to go, hey, you want an ADU, but you can't quite afford it. But if you build an ADU and you deed restrict it, the town can give you an extra, $20,000, $50,000 to do that. Would you do it? And they'd be like, yeah, I would. I'll deed restrict my ADU and it'll be there forever and blah, blah, blah. That's kind of an opportunity that meets in alignment with some other goals that are talked about at the town of Minturn. But relying on just whoever comes through the door to do that, that is a riskier move out of all of it. Like the private industry just can't share it anymore because the gap isn't there anymore over profits versus construction like it used to be, where they could give up more units. And people still fight density, until that mentality changes and it's accepted and small lots are accepted, to be able to pull off this type of thing. There's so many bigger philosophical things that are all layered on top of each other. There is no magical solution. But it may end up that we abandon that buyout, and if the authority comes back and says, hey, this is what we can do for you, and we can get you up to 12. What do we have? We have 4 units. Maybe we get up to 8 units of deed restricted because they can buy down. And maybe it's not 200% AMI. Maybe our restrictions are more restrictive on that, and our goals are set lower, which is their goal before the codes changed. That's a possibility, and we're open. We're loving having that opportunity to speak more. So I think it's going to get better and better for us, anyway, not for the bigger picture.
Well, and just to be clear, my opinion of this project is that I wouldn't change my opinion on the density. Relative to how that housing discussion, wherever that shakes out. I wouldn't say if you can't get to 50% or what you're proposing on paper, that I want to see 3 units gone. I'm not saying that at all. I'm fine with the density.
Oh, yeah.
But by the same token, you're tasked with the timing of where you're at today. So I'm assuming, Scott, that this is going through as presented under the 200% AMI, and that's the way it's going to stay, because that's the way the economics work right now.
Well, so a couple things, both you and Tom brought up Tori's letter, and I think, that was extremely helpful because this is the first time we've really had to apply the new ordinance. And
right.
We're finding out right out of the gates that our 200% AMI, as you recall, we spent a year talking about the housing plan and our target, and it was 140. And right at the last minute, it got raised, no offense, based on planning commission deliberations of, what about these people that are over 140 and still can't find a home? Let's raise it up to 200. And it seemed like a workable solution. And now we know that it might not reflect reality, or it might not achieve the goals that the town has set for itself. So if we're getting this feedback right now, which is great, we can recalibrate or at least allow ourselves the flexibility to work with each project that comes in. Maybe the 200% stays, but there's incentives to achieve something lower. And now we have a very activated, engaged Eagle County Housing and Development Authority that sees that Minturn is actively reviewing and probably approving some new development, and they can be at the table. And there were some ideas thrown around about buying down some of these units, trying to get a different mix of, I don't know if Alice and Jenna, correct me if I'm wrong, it was 150 to 200% AMI and different thresholds.
Yeah,
there.
I mean, we just started that conversation, but a big part of what Tori was saying too was that she needed to have the conversation, or they need to have the conversation with the town to decide if the resident occupancy accomplished what you were trying to accomplish more than the deed price restriction anyway. Like maybe the deed price restriction wasn't even what you were trying to accomplish. You're trying to accomplish people living year round in Minturn. So
yep.
That if 200 is at market or going with market, then maybe the resident occupancy serves your purposes more. And of course, we already went from 20 to 50% on that. So she was saying, well, you're already doing that. Anyway, I think those are bigger conversations for you guys to have as a town. So
no, that is
true.
But
we're trying to spur the conversation, to lead the way as best we can and still make things work, and set a good example as one of the first PUDs that's coming through, and not try to do the bare minimum, but we also have to be fiscally successful too, to be a benefit to the neighborhood.
Yeah,
Well,
that's well put.
Nobody's really, we don't really talk about in the same breath as the AMI is, the cost, at the end of the day, the cost per square foot to build it, whatever it is, if the cost of building it is what it is today, and you're trying to build something that is bigger than what the AMI target is allowing you to go for, you're not going to hit your target.
Well, and in my case too, I'm not willing to build an inferior quality. So, you can hit those targets by doing things that I don't do. That's not my business. So therefore I think that the conversations with the county, the ability to buy things down, and the cash in lieu program that the town may have really becomes more substantial, because you don't want people building things like the things that we just tore down off of our property because they were practically uninhabitable. I mean,
Right.
It was housing. Yes, people lived there, but it was I'm not against public works, but it was unsafe. It was unsanitary. It was, so that's what you don't, that's what you don't want. You can build to, maybe not to code, but you can build not to code at 100% AMI, but that's not my business. That's not what the owners of the property want. They want a really nice quality product somewhere that they would want to live, that I want to live, that Jenna wants to live, that you guys would want to live, and that's going to last and be beautiful in Minturn for a long time. So,
yeah, there's definitely.
Let's hope that
products out
materials
there.
costs come down and make life easier
Yeah.
for everybody.
Allison snoops around the rest of the valley and what's being built here, and we've checked out other modular construction houses and talked to people, and they're like, the walls are paper thin, like the windows suck. We could build like a lot of product that's getting built up there, but we just refuse to do anything less than what people deserve.
Yep. All right. Well, that's all I have for now. So I'll let everybody else speak.
All right, thanks, Jeff.
Scott, it's approximately 9:30. We still have time. I'd like to hear Elliot and Chris, and I'd like to make a few comments tonight. Being we don't get to drainage, can we put that on to later?
Yeah.
Because we should talk about it. So let's go to Elliot. Are you out there, Elliot?
I'm here.
Your turn.
Thank you. Yeah, Jen, I think this is great. I mean, I think the term density, the old days, I don't know what the old days are, but it used to be kind of frowned upon, or like it had a negative connotation to it. But I've always seen the positivity to that. Like seeing a project like this is really great coming into town potentially. So I applaud you for going down this this avenue. But you know, one thing I want to I just always think about just with general living is sort of decreasing consumption. You know, whether it's water, resources, you know, utilities, energy, whatever. And I know you mentioned earlier, the first thing I want to talk about is solar. And you said it was in a sunny area. I think that would be there's a great opportunity there to, you know, tap into renewable resources. And I mean, there's nothing better than the sun. Now, would this be something that you guys would add into the development? Because the more I think about it, you know, I know that there's incentives from, I guess it's Excel. Like Excel gives you an incentive to add these to houses. There's tax benefits and things like that. And I'm not sure if that's something that would help you guys in this development. I know it would certainly decrease the consumption of the residents, and possibly also, you know, decrease their utility bills, which would, you know, aid to sustainability and longevity. I know you talked about that. I just wasn't sure if you guys sort of had a plan going forward with utilizing solar power.
We do. We have it written into our PUD guide as an allowable use, which is specific. Actually, I was kind of a given to me. It was already in our design stuff, but Scott said, hey, you should really just have it as a use. And there's two different ones. There's larger solar power and smaller residential. And we say, absolutely. The bigger philosophical question that goes with this is those rebates and things go to a homeowner.
Okay.
That's how the programs are written up. So I think it would actually be more beneficial to leave it up to the homeowner, and then it decreases the cost on the front end from us to do that without getting those benefits of the rebates. That happens a lot. A lot of them are Holy Cross ones, not Excel, that I've seen, and we're not in Holy Cross District. We are in Excel, so I don't know their programs as much because they're not really on the ground. We're kind of an anomaly in Minturn with Excel. We'd hope that they would do that with us, and we're still in discussions with them about the overall plan. They haven't brought it up though. Correct me if I'm wrong, Allison. So I don't think that they're not trying to get us to do that, which I think is a shame on their end, but I get why, because they lose money because they don't make money if it's solar. So we have the ability for the homeowner who directly will benefit from those incentives to do that with these units. And there's nothing holding them back from doing that. And I think that maybe our hands are kind of tied at this point to allow that. But we see your point. And it's also, you know, the bigger thing, Eagle County on their sustainability and their referral comments, they're going all about, oh, you should do this. Man, do you know how internally when you build these houses and you add all these extras, and for the long run, it works out great. But on the front end, that's a luxury, unfortunately, in construction to build homes until there's enough people in the world that buy into it. So the minority of people, you know, build horribly, and the majority are doing all these green things. It's going to be just so cost prohibitive to do it on a small scale. So we really looked at it, and like I said, we have the heart to do it. It's just problematic. But if the HOA wanted to get together and put one of those giant solar flowers that, you know, that kind of blossom and bloom in the open space, and that, you know, powered whatever all around the property, all the lights and that'd be awesome. And that's allowed. And so at this point, that's kind of where we're at, but we hear you.
Jenna, quick question, and Elliot, I don't mean to jump in front of you, but you know, pre-wiring and having each of those units, if they're manufactured, you know, be solar ready, is that doable?
And we've talked about that too. It depends.
Yeah, it depends. It depends on the attic space and things like that. So I'm working with them right now. So we're doing, you know, some hinged roofs and figuring out what we have, and we're also doing some units in the attic, some HVAC. So we're still working on that. So the plant has the first set of the plans that they're just starting to put into engineering. So
great, thank you.
Yeah, and that's a real limitation, unfortunately, that goes with height. because we don't have, the average height throughout our valley is about 35 feet. That's an average height. Minturns is a little lower. So you can tell when you look at a house that they're built right up to their attic, which doesn't leave a lot of attic space because people are trying to maximize the like interior side of things. I'm and Scott, Scott Schlosser, that they were so ahead of their time. They used to be my neighbor, and I used to go into their house and I saw, what's available if you have the money and you can construct in a way that works with the technology to, maximize attic space and do all these things. But again, it's really tight. If we're trying to just get, garages and take care of parking and, have livable spaces and marketable spaces and do these things that, so that we don't have just expensive 1-bedrooms. Yeah, but we hear you. We're trying our best. Let's go that route. We'll keep exploring.
Anything else, Elliot?
I guess I'm sort of a, a forward-thinking millennial. It's just, I almost feel like the magic, the pulling the hat, the rabbit out of the hat is, how do we save water? I think that's sort of the biggest, the hottest topic in Minturn is water, And, I've researched a little bit about what, it looks like there's going to have to be a fair bit of irrigation here, just to sort of touch upon what Jeff was talking about. And, how we sort of tackle this one. I've looked at all these different, I know that Colorado is just on the cusp of exploring municipalities with reclaimed gray water. And I'm just not, this may not even be worth talking about, but, in terms of just trying to save water or, live efficiently with this being a potential crisis, at what extent is this being addressed for, kind of the future of the town? That's kind of where my head's at. How is this going to really help the town 20 years from now? The density thing you got nailed down, which is great, and affordability is great. I just, from an environmental standpoint and from, decreasing our footprint, if you will, I'd like to know what we could do in the way of saving water. I'd love to know sort of a little bit more detail on that.
Yeah, Elliot, if I can jump in. So I did a community, 05-ish. And we did gray water reclamation, and it watered the community, and there was also a golf course. So we had a complete gray water system back in the day. I'm sure they've gotten better now. And then my development in Gypsum has a totally separate non-potable water system. So that every house has 2 taps. They have a treated water and a river, non-potable system. You need some scale to do it. So it would be something that would be really interesting to talk about on a town level. And so, yeah, we talked about it. Jenna and I talked about it. I don't think we have the scale here to be efficient with it. But when you're doing 1,000 acres, when you're doing 4,000 acres, even in Gypsum with 170 acres, it does make sense, and you can make it work and you can pay for it. But I think stay on it. I just think you need to keep pulling people together, and you might be able to get enough mass that you could do it to serve a whole, the whole town or a whole block or something like that. Because then you also have the recapture of the rainwater and the snow melt off of the roofs, which I think in Minturn plays even better than recapturing gray water.
Yeah, we originally came in, Elliot. We wanted to get a well and use that well for irrigation, but that interferes with the water rights with the town. And how do you accomplish that? So we kind of got shot down pretty quick on trying to do a non-potable source of water for irrigation. And
I'm pretty sure it's illegal to capture your roof snow melt too.
You can only do like a 40-gallon bucket barrel, which is, exactly. And then you have to use it within 24 hours. So that's problematic too. Yeah. And then, I know you guys are concerned about our grasscape, but there are other things we can do. We're looking at, drought tolerant grasses. We're not doing Kentucky bluegrass. I'd like to do buffalo grass, which isn't necessarily pretty when it's dry. It turns like, you know, a dusty yellowish grass. But then when it does water, it greens back up again. It works with the tolerances. So we're aware of doing responsible like landscaping materials, but then that's an inherent conflict, right? With, I mean, I'm really happy that you guys are okay with like less than 25%, but I'm working on a different project that they have a big sustainability goals of reducing water, and their landscaping requirements were through the roof. I'm like, do you see the conflict that's actually in your code? You're requiring a whole bunch of landscaping that has to be watered, but you don't want to use water. There's people, we got to start connecting the dots on a larger picture. And how do we do that? We'd substitute, we'd increase more of like giant boulder and artwork in our park instead of trees if it was acceptable, but that's not something that is in the code that allows those things to happen. You know what I mean? So that's kind of where we're at. It's a tug of war, constantly trying to figure out that balance. But if we could do it, we would. Honestly, I'm on your page.
I'm glad the conversation's happening. That's just something that looking ahead, I'd like to promote if possible. If it's even able to be done. So thank you guys for even discussing it.
Sure.
Thanks for all your comments.
Chris. Christopher.
Hey, yeah, I'm here. So let's see, Jenna, Allison, Dave, thank you. Jenna, great presentation. Loved seeing the neighborhood at kind of street level. It was a great way to see it. So I guess as Elliot, Tom, and Jeff brought up some great comments. So I'm not going to reiterate some of that stuff. So I guess my question, and I'm not sure if it was in there, but just for a person like me thinking of a couple, we'll just say they make it easy. They make $100,000 combined income. As we're talking, open space and we're talking height, what is this one bedroom or this single family house going to go for? What is this duplex going to go for? Any idea? Or did I just miss that?
No, we haven't really published those because there's too many unknowns. We didn't feel it was in our best practice to kind of make promises when things were fluctuating around us. We weren't guaranteed the density, we weren't guaranteed, the heights, we weren't guaranteed anything. So we didn't want to have false hopes. Allison does the financials and her preliminary things that are coming in on certain units. And this is what the beautiful part about having a mixed product type and having, small units themselves, which carry less overhead and so forth. We're already, within the 140 to 160 on certain units. And so I had my realtor friend, because here's the reality, Chris. Since I almost didn't have a place to live in Minturn and had to move out very recently, which still stresses me out today because I have 1 year left in my unit and then I got to go somewhere else. I've expressed to Lynn here and there, I've never thought I'd be a homeowner again because I just can't afford it. And this product, and this project came along and I started to see as we got towards the end more recently, I think that we'll be able to buy a unit. Not only that, what if I bought a unit that's a resident occupied unit and then said, hey, county authority, I want to deed restrict this unit further. Can you give me some money back to do that? And if they say, yes, we can, that helps offset my costs. I'm like, wow, this is really becoming a great potential. And then, so I had my realtor friend run some numbers, and pretty much our mortgage payment on a small unit would be just as much as we're paying rent in the unit that we're in. And I was like, well, that is inspiring. So I can't give you any answers, and Allison could pipe in here anytime, but we're in alignment with what I'm paying in rent, if that's any help.
Yeah,
right
and
now.
I think, I want to see locals moving in here. And I guess, that attainable number. And I just don't know what that is, these days. And I think of, mom and dad working kids, and what is a unit that they could afford here? So I guess that was just a question I had. Thank you. And another question is, we're talking garages, underground garages in the back. I'm sure you've done soils testing there. So at our house, we built a garage and we got into it. Then I kind of wish I never did it, because it ended up to be kind of a nightmare. But the water table's got to be high off the hill back there. And no one's worried about it?
Yeah, we didn't encounter any water in any of the borings, but we are going to have a drainage system that's in there, that's in the garage, below the garage, and then that would also be able to remove any water. So, but there was no water found in the soils reports and all the borings that Kumar did.
So I suppose groundwater you can't really use to water the landscape, can you? That probably needs to go to the.
Yeah, that goes to water discord.
There's no free water anywhere.
Nope.
To your point, that the Christiansens have a pond in front of their house that's there, and we've had some really great success with water just disappearing. We've also had one winter there, and that's where snow was, and so far it's kind of like a test hole. But so far so good, knock on wood. But yeah, we're prepared to deal with it, and with the controlled drainage versus just the historic one. So you may be experiencing where you're at. I know there's a couple of underground streams that run through, where the schoolhouse, the red house, the cherry house, looks like a schoolhouse. There's a stream that runs underground there, and then there's a couple that are not too far away from where you live. So I could understand why you may have had the differences. But since we're engineering this from fresh, and we have enough land to absorb that, so our park space could be a drainage pond if we have an event. You know what I mean?
Perfect.
So we're controlling it a little bit more than maybe historic older downtown has those controls in there. So that'll help too.
Otherwise, I mean, the three people before me asked, had great questions. That would be great, like how Tom brought up with, if we could keep units maybe that start out deed restricted, they stay deed restricted somehow. Anyway.
Yeah, they're not going away. Just to
Sorry?
clarify, the deed restrictions will never sunset.
Okay.
The resident occupied or the actual deed restricted price cap, they're never going to go away.
Okay.
Just for the record. Yeah.
Otherwise, thanks so much for all the information.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
So my name is Lynn Mother Nature. And of course, I would love to see more open space, which I know probably will not happen. However, I would like to have clarification on the precise square footage rather than the percentage, which gives me a better idea. And I believe it was in Mike Sawyer's letter where he suggested it might have to be done through a variance, which I agree with, because in future PUDs, we're going to have to deal with each one of them individually. And I think that might be a little bit safer way to do it.
Lynn, just to clarify that the variance or the variation can be approved through this process. I don't think there's a separate application that needs to
be done.
No.
Okay. And Jeff said I might have a better idea on the pavers. We've talked about this on other projects. There are probably drought resistant grasses that could be used there. The other issue with that is plowing, because over the years, you may have an issue keeping that maintained, because those pavers coming up and being caught by the edge of a blade or something.
Yeah, and we were thinking that the HOA would have one of the brush cleaners, like the sidewalk cleaners with the brushes.
For snow?
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I've not seen that. So is that is that how you're talking about all the tire tracks that go into the garages?
Well, those are privately owned, so the people will be managing their own snow removal on their own properties. we're talking about any common space, and then we have the sidewalks and the road that'll be maintained by the HOA.
And then those parking areas.
So they would probably then either have to snow plow or shovel that onto their grass areas.
Yep.
Because that's a lot. I mean, I have that. That's what's at my house in the summer. In the winter, it becomes an issue. And I have a separate issue to deal with because when my house is an old home, 1907, and originally it's been remodeled and built on over the years and things, but the plumbing going into my house is not as deep as it should be. So if I clear those, it leaves it more open to frost. If I leave the snow there, it gives me less capability of using it. And that's why I'm here. I love it. It's old fashioned. There's another house down the street from me that has it. And I wouldn't have it any other way, but it does create maintenance issues.
Got it. Now, the nice part, if you
HOA
can,
would have a, oh, sorry, Jenna, go ahead.
I was gonna say, if you can look on the picture in front of you, the second story actually cantilevers out over some of the driveway as well. So it's not a full, the driveway paths themselves are a minimum of 18 feet, but they may be only, 8-foot exposure. So that'll help a little bit with knocking down some of that snow.
Yeah, and the HOA will have the choice if they want to provide that service or to provide that service to people who want it.
Talking about shrubbery, be careful on what you choose. There are those that are drought resistant also. Lilac was mentioned, but it takes a lot of water and it throws off a lot of saplings. So it can take over now. There's one shrub in the lilac family that came out a number of years ago. It actually blooms off and on pretty much throughout the summer and does not get as tall. It's more dense, but it's really pretty. I don't know water requirements on that though.
Could you send it to us? Then we can find out what the water requirements
I can investigate it. Yeah, I never had, my business in the earlier days when I was younger and more physical, I had a crew of 15 people doing maintenance at one point. And all over the valley. If it was raining in Edwards, we drove to Eastvale and it wasn't raining and we could continue our jobs. I've worked up in Strawberry Park, Mountain Star, a lot of Beaver Creek, Vale. So there's lots of different, what they call micro environments, different places you are. Down the street from me, there was a house that had a really pretty bush that really shouldn't have existed. And right now the name is flowing out of, not in my head, because it was taken out with the new owner, but it was on the south side of the house. So a lot of times it depends where you locate things too within your environment that make it work.
Right.
That's something.
Well, I'd be open for suggestions if you have lists. So we're working with, local landscapers, but my planting experience is zone 8 and 9, which is completely useless information here. So I'll take your input.
I think
mine was a south facing an eagle.
I have a Mountain Star planning list. I know. I might have another one at home. I'll have to take a look. But I mean, you can make it work.
Sure.
One great thing that I find that I like is bulbs, because you really, they're underground all winter and the snow melt gives them the water. And then they come up and they add a lot of springtime color. The foliage stays green for a long time. It may not be as ornamental as flowering perennials or something, but, and they multiply on their own, which is nice.
Yeah, I would like to do Russian sage, which I love the smell of. It's a great bee pollinator plant. And that's very low, very xeriscaping, low maintenance. And I would encourage people to do that. Our first landscaper that we originally hired, who was really talented, but at the same time was from a different elevation, had a form of oak, that scrub oak pretty much, that was going behind the multifamily, which is fine, but it's actually really conducive to fire. Yeah. And so I had to scrap that and I traded it out with chokecherry clump, which did really well in my south facing lawn in Eagle, which I got sun. Like I could grow a lot in down there compared to my lot here in Minturn. I actually think that because of the cooler climate and the limited, we only have, 6 hours of sun, full sun. It's a little more helpful because things don't get scorched so much. So we took a look at that, and we're glad that we're working with local landscapers, have a lot of experience all the way down to rifle. So they get the dry stuff or the mountain stuff. So it's been helpful.
Again, the height thing, I don't quite understand that. I'd love to see, or maybe just with my discussing with Scott, I might get a better understanding of what you're referring to. And I can do that on some other time, or Madison even.
Yeah, and Scott, I can provide you or Madison with sections too, and I mean Jenna detailed
Scenarios.
quite well in her documents how the weighted calcs go, but I can provide you with a section that really illustrates it, where we just have a stair tower that comes out onto the roof deck, which is just this little 68 square feet that are up here, and the rest of the building's down here. And I don't want to ask for this height top because I don't want to set a precedent. And also I have no intention of building the mass to that height. So anyway, that might help you with Lynn too.
That might
Or
be
with anybody who wants to understand. Yeah.
So Jeff, when we were doing a conceptual on the property kind of in this area a few months ago, and I learned that condos don't own the land underneath them. I assume these buildings will be owning the land underneath them, or is that the HOA?
No, the
Yeah, so what
buildings own the, go ahead, Jenna.
Yeah, so in lot 7 is the exception to the rule, because when you stack a unit, you actually have to condominiumize them. And so every other space around becomes a common element, which is either a general common element or a limited common element. That's the only one, because they don't go right to the ground. Like a townhome goes right to the ground. We actually, and this is one of the variations we want to ask for staff, and we've asked, for this ability, is to create these townhomes as lots, not come back and just do party walls and then have common ground outside. We actually want the whole lot to be the length and beyond the townhome unit for that reason, Lynn. So lot 7, if we get our wish, is the only one that won't directly own the land, but they'll have a bigger interest in their lot on the outside than the rest of it. So that's how that works.
And that'll be owned just by the owners of
that
building. It won't be owned by the general HOA. It'll be a separate little association.
Mm-hmm.
And then can I clarify as to what happens? 30 days it goes on the market for Minturn residents.
Mm-hmm.
30 days after that, you can include Minturn residents, but it then gets expanded to Eagle County.
Correct.
What happens at 60 days?
If we haven't sold a unit in 6 days, first off, we'll be shocked. And then second, it goes to the general wider berth. So if somebody is moving here, and so this is where it gets a little trickier, and that this becomes our risk, is that we have 10% deed restricted right now and 50% resident occupied. So 60% of the units are tied up. That does leave some units without restrictions on there. That's the little bit of free market. So in the event after 60 days, we haven't sold, there are a few units they could buy without a restriction. That's how that would work. That's the intention of the plan. Now, talking with housing, since we're just beginning these conversations now, a little better late than never, that could change. We don't know how they want to do that. They're becoming the authority, and then that we haven't seen the IGA that the town is now entering in with the housing authority, and there might be some other room in there. But generally speaking, that's how it's going to roll. So someone could move here from Leadville because they are outside of Eagle County. They have the option of getting in after 9, and they could buy a deed restricted unit because I think there is a relationship with Lake County and Eagle County about employees. So that's a possibility. So we'll know more as we explore with the housing authority, but generally that's how it's going to be.
Scott, do you have anything else?
Not at this time. I think it's late, and I could certainly respond to some of the discussions on building height calculations and some other stuff, but I would suggest that we tee those issues up and those further discussions, maybe get a little further into the weeds on some stuff at the next hearing and try to resolve some of those issues and get Planning Commission's feedback on, building height calculations, or if there's concerns over the drainage plan or some of these other outstanding issues. Maybe we can kind of focus on those and, use our time wisely next time to really just focus on those.
I thoroughly agree. It's a little after 10 o'clock now. We'd have to shut off soon anyhow.
Yep.
So is there anybody else has anything, one more thing they'd like to say this evening? No, in regards to this? So
Anything
with
in
that-
particular that Planning Commission would want us to come back and cover in the next meeting?
Well, I think drainage and I think the height I'd like to see. And I'd like that figure from Jenna on the open space if she doesn't mind.
Yeah, it's actually in the packet, the consolidated
Square
package that, yep. It
Okay,
sure
I'll
is.
search further. I did not see it.
Yeah.
And I've written more than half of this.
Yeah, you know what, Lynn, it's a big document. Why don't I just send it to Madison and then
That'd
she
be
can
great.
forward it to you? Yeah, but we have those calcs.
That's wonderful.
Yep.
So with that,
Just real quick, so then Scott, you will communicate with me on anything we might need for the next meeting before we could take a vote?
Yes.
Okay.
And if this assumes the immediate planning commission hearing following this one?
Yep. So we
this
would,
will be, we will probably go for a continuation this evening.
So do we have to renotice that, Scott Madison?
nope.
Okay.
Okay, and also I guess we give a chance for staff to look at the plat a little further too. We might be able to knock a couple more things off the outstanding list.
Yep, exactly.
And just
Okay.
in Jeff Spinell's, just for him, sometimes some of the most obvious things, like they were talking about bear containers, are the things people miss. So I appreciate Jeff saying that. I have a property next door to me that was sold. The new owner kept all the bear containers that were there, or all the containers that were there, which many of them did not include bear containers, nor have they been policed or replaced.
Mm.
And that is a major spot of where the bear comes off the mountain behind my house and their house, comes down to their trash can, right down their driveway, and goes right down Pine Street.
Yep.
It needs, sometimes obvious needs to be said.
Well,
So I-
all ours are trash, all ours are bear proof, so
Right.
we've covered it. Yeah, ours has been broken into 4 times. Well, tried, attempted. And man, those waste management or honey wagon cans, they take a beating.
Right.
Let me tell you.
I heard the can go over next door one night out, and I looked out my bedroom window, which is on an angle about 15 feet away. And I watched that bear take his paws and tear the lid in half to get it open.
Wow.
So
Crazy.
yeah, it's real important.
Yep. Agreed.
With that, may I have a motion tonight? Somebody? Scott, did you have something?
Anyone left?
Well, just to make sure we understand the next hearing date and that this is going to be continued to a date certain.
Certain. Do we know what that might be?
The next hearing is June 9th.
And does that work for everybody? Yes?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
So in making
we
the
must.
motion, will that please be presented? Jeff, how would you like to go for it?
I'll take it. I would like to make a motion to continue the Belden Place preliminary PUD review until the following meeting on June the 9th.
May I have a second?
Second.
Motion by Jeff, second by Tom. All in favor, or let's do a roll call on this. Lynn, I.
Chris, aye.
Tom,
Aye.
Jeff,
Aye.
and who am I missing? Elliot. Oh, Elliot, you can't vote. Can
I
Elliot
can't do
vote now
anything.
because Jenna's recused?
No, the only time Elliot can vote is if he is part of the establishment of the quorum, like he's needed to establish the quorum at the beginning of the meeting.
Thanks for answering that, Madison. I think that's the first time I've ever really thought of that. And Richard, thanks for coming, even though you didn't get to say anything.
Anytime. I'll talk to Scott about working on responding to some of the points that were made this evening. So we'll see you.
And Jeff, the same with you. Thank you for being here. Anybody else? There was one more, Dave Anderson. Thank you for being here. Greg, thanks for sitting and staying up with us.
Thanks everybody for listening.
Thank you.
Yeah, honoring our presentation and so forth. But yeah, we'll make this happen. It's so important to us. So we appreciate your time.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Good night. Madison, you've got everything there you need?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Project updates real quick, Scott?
Yeah, so nothing really to report on Chapter 16 code amendment other than the ordinance to approve changes to building lot coverage and impervious coverage and a couple other things with regard to stream setbacks, I believe was approved on second reading. So that is a done deal. Thank you very much for your attention to all those things and all the work we put into making those recommended changes. Community plan update project. We just put the final touches on an RFP. As you might recall, the town has been awarded a grant from the state. And so we've got a project budget for the update to the community plan. We are getting the RFP out hopefully Friday. So the process will start, and we'll start accepting proposals from firms or teams of firms. And we've got a schedule laid out that takes us through the summer of receiving those, reviewing those, doing interviews of consultant teams, and hopefully by August we'll have chosen a consulting team, and we'll be moving forward with updating the community plan.
And Minturn North preliminary plan application status?
We are expecting a response from the applicant. As you recall, that was continued to a June hearing. I think it was June 23rd. And we set a deadline of this Friday for the applicant to respond to a number of outstanding issues and things that we've been looking for that we really need to be able to finish our staff report and make findings on that proposal. So hopefully we'll see what we receive on Friday.
So I have a question for you, dear. Do we have any knowledge as to when we will be returning to in-person meetings?
Yes, actually, and this is all preliminary. I think this is set in stone, but I'm not positive. Council, I believe, will be going back to in-person next week. And then I assume Planning Commission will follow them. This will be Planning Commission and staff, or Town Council and staff in the room only, no applicants. Applicants and public will remain online, so it will be a hybrid form just to kind of keep control over numbers. As restrictions lighten, we still want to be cautious. And then hopefully past then, though obviously I don't have a date, we'll go back, we'll resume in person full time. So that's been the discussion. So expect the June 9th meeting. If that one doesn't happen, then probably the June 23rd one to be in person.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else have anything?
Scott, did you want to touch on?
Ready to take a nap.
Sorry, just one second. Scott, did you want to touch on the NAP agenda item next week meeting, or did you want to?
Well, since you brought it up, why don't you talk about it?
Great, thanks. So Michelle had asked Scott and I to look further into, as we start talks with the Forest Service, to go to the next steps after the NAIOP winner was awarded.
Just so
And we-
everybody knows, that's the Grand Junction, or the Dow Junction, I'm sorry.
Yes, the Dow
Yeah.
Junction parcel. I know Scott's been fielding calls, and Michelle has been fielding calls about people interested in the project and the outcome and what they can do with that. And we were hoping to get actually Greg Gastineau, since he was one of the judges, before Planning Commission next meeting to kind of discuss like all the just kind of bring to light all of the things that went into them making their decision, and the important aspects that we'll probably need to start focusing on as we get closer to Dow Junction being realized. So
I'll just add to that. We're going to meet with the Forest Service representatives next week, which is a big deal because they've been busy fighting forest fires and all sorts of other stuff and COVID all of last year. And so we're re-engaging with the Forest Service, and the goal is going to be a new RFP for that site. So working towards issuance of an RFP based on the at least some of what we learned through this competition. And I think that's where Greg Gastineau comes in. Certainly Michelle and Madison were sitting in the room through that competition. And just talking about, if the town had an idea of what was important for Dow Junction 5 years ago, retail sales tax generating uses, lodging tax, access to Meadow Mountain, parking for Meadow Mountain uses, regional transportation, and if that's what we put forward to the student teams as the things that were most important to the town, how did that translate into what they produced? And the winning project, how does that stack up against some of those goals? What are the realities that were discussed with the judges, the real professionals that finance these deals, that build these types of projects? Is retail really viable on that site? Is a food court viable on that site? Those types of things I think we really need to kind of start parsing out, and that's going to help form what the real plan for that site probably is going to be. So we'd like to try to do that next meeting if we could, because I think the rest of our agendas moving through June and July are probably going to be pretty full. So that's it.
Okay. Now can we go for a motion to close tonight's meeting?
I'll make a motion to close tonight's meeting, May 26th,
2021.
2021. Thank you.
May I have a second?
Second.
Motion by Chris, second by Tom. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.